Welcome to a debate edition of the Whatever podcast. We're coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I'm your host and moderator, Brian Atlas. A few quick announcements before the show begins. This podcast is viewer-supported, heavy YouTube demonetization, so please consider donating through Streamlabs instead of super chatting, as YouTube takes a brutal 30% cut. That's streamlabs.com/whatever. Link is in the description. We prioritize messages that are made via Streamlabs. To read a message is $99 and up. And if you want to ask, you can ask a question or make a statement. We're going to read those in batches at various breaks throughout the debate. There's not going to be any instant TTS. Now, if you want to just tip and have 100% of your contribution go towards us, no platform fees, no cut, you can via Venmo or Cash App. That's Whatever Pod on both. Link is in the description. We're also live on Twitch right now. Pull up another tab, go to twitch.tv/whatever, drop us a follow and a Prime sub if you have one. And then quick disclaimer, the views expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of the Whatever channel. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two guests. I'm joined today by Dr. David Patrick Harry. He has a PhD in religious studies from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. He's a traditionalist and Eastern Orthodox Christian. He is also an online educator. Also joining us today is Zina. She's a senior at USC pursuing a sociology degree. She is a leftist. She does social and philosophical commentary and is a content creator and was recently featured on a Jubilee episode debating Jordan Peterson. She's the Jordan Peterson Slayer. So there you have it, folks. The topic today is free will and determinism. You'll each have up to a 10-minute opening statement, and then the rest of the show is going to be open conversation. We're going to have 2-3 breaks for messages from the audience. Patrick, you're going to go first. Go ahead.
All right. Brian, thanks for having me. Zina, thanks for being here for the debate. To begin, obviously, I'm going to be affirming the existence of free will, and determinism is self-refuting ideology. Every paradigm has a metaphysics, an epistemology, and an ethics. Two of those legs, determinism is already going to lose. If all beliefs are conditioned based on, nature versus nurture, they're neurological, your brain's determined, you're conditioned by social patterns, well then all knowledge claims are then beliefs. And if that's the case, then you can actually not make a universal knowledge claim. The same thing as if you were debating an argument for relativism. Claiming that relativism, that there is no truth as a truth statement, is counterfactual and contradicts itself, can't go anywhere. That's a self-defeating argument, especially within a debate that is premised on logic, reason, and all these different things. And for my opening statement, I put together a quick little logical syllogism that demonstrates that moral responsibility is inconceivable within a deterministic framework, and I look forward going back and forth with Zina in regards to social justice, racism, slavery, reparations. All these different things actually depend upon moral responsibility and people actually having responsibility on their right or wrong choices, good and bad, these types of things. But there isn't an objective standard within a deterministic framework. And so they basically have compatibilism, something like Daniel Dennett's argument, which is really just a semantic argument that's using freedom in a new context. And that's, again, I'm not going to play that game. But for just a quick opening syllogism, and so anybody watching, if this opening statement maybe feels like it's a little bit over your head, that's all right. We'll get into the nitty-gritty as the debate moves forward. But if moral responsibility, rational deliberation, and love are real, which the majority of people presume that they are, and determinism, compatibilism, or Skinnerian behaviorism render them illusions, then determinism, compatibilism, or behaviorism are self-refuting worldviews because they depend on the very realities that they deny. And so I have 7 principles, or essentially they're different apologetic arguments to deconstruct determinism. The first one would be obviously the moral responsibility argument, that if determinism is true, no one can actually be held morally responsible for anything. Number 2, and this is the irony of actually being in a debate, that even though you're arguing in favor of determinism, you're again, the debate is premised upon that you're going to persuade somebody to adopt determinism, which then undermines the central premise of determinism. So argument from rationality, it's a self-refutation. If determinism is true, then all knowledge are beliefs. Therefore, determinism itself is a belief. Amongst all beliefs are equal. And on that basis, determinism is not rationally justified. It's only due to prior states. And then a third one, the phenomenological argument against determinism, is that no determinist actually lives as if determinism is real. They live as if they are free. And so I'm interested to hear what Zina thinks about voting and how voting works or democratic structures work within a deterministic worldview. Choosing a career, debating, is premised on the idea that we actually have free will, and promises, making promises. If she makes promises to her friends, regret, guilt, any sort of deliberation, these are going to, again, be inconsistencies with a deterministic worldview. Argument from counterfactual possibility. All decisions presuppose modal freedom. So when evaluating alternative possibilities, determinists rely on what could have been. For example, if they go to court, yet in their worldview, there is never a what could have been because everything's already determined. And then I assume what's going to pop up is that determinists like to use a neuroscientific argument that's really built upon Benjamin Libet's findings. It's really from the 1980s, and the field of neuroscience has actually moved beyond this. So it's a minority opinion, the idea that neuroscience has actually proven that your brain is determined or your thoughts are determined. This is not the universal opinion of the field. It's actually a minority opinion. And so Libet himself actually says that his research did not prove this. And the premise of the research is that they were asking people to kind of lift their finger, do different things, and then they were measuring what is called resting potentials, and therefore insinuating that the brain is already determined before the action occurs. And so I reference everybody to go look up David Schroeder's 2012 article. It's titled RP as Neural Noise, RP meaning resting potential. And so the majority of the field believes that whatever was happening is just neural noise, and actually the premise that neuroscience has highlighted that everything is deterministic, that is not a majority consensus. Creativity and novelty. So if you're a determinist, you're going to have to reject human agency in regards to poetry, art, invention, moral heroism. These things break away from any sort of predictive causal mechanism that they would argue for. And then the last one is the problem of infinite regress. So if you go back to Aristotle, the unmoved mover, this was something that was dealt with in classical Greek philosophy. And so obviously I'm coming at it as an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and so we believe in the Imago Dei, Genesis 1:26. And because of that, I myself am also, in a sense, an unmoved mover, that I can be an uncaused cause within myself as a person, utilizing my free will. So those 7 points, I'm sure we'll probably rehash those and come back, all 7 of which are essentially logical death shots to determinism. And then the last thing I just wanted to highlight, 6 points on why determinism is actually not a dominant perspective within academia, generally speaking. And so determinism was very popular toward the end of the 18th century and into the 19th century. So you have people like Marx and Freud, but into the 20th century, multiple turns have occurred in various fields that have essentially rendered determinism as nonsense. First one is quantum mechanics. So the Heisenberg uncertainty principle contradicts Laplacian determinism. Laplace's demon is a common sort of thought experiment determinists use. Well, again, quantum mechanics itself has already refuted that that's the universe that we live in. So in regards to physics, physics has already refuted determinism. In regards to mathematics, chaos theory in the 1960s also refuted determinism, because it demonstrated that in an attempt to actually show that deterministic systems are completely determined, it demonstrated that actually they're unpredictable, and there is no deterministic full system that we've discovered yet. Number 3 is mathematical logic. So Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorems demonstrates that there are limits to what can be proven, and no complex system can prove its own consistency. That would also be the case for determinism. You presuppose determinism to prove determinism. That is a contradiction. The cognitive revolution, linguistics, Noam Chomsky has already refuted the idea that we are determined. Language acquisition, so that was another turn in the 20th century, again refuting determinism. And then number 5, philosophy of mind. So epiphenomenalism is typically the way that determinists would argue for their philosophy of mind, but emergentism is now the dominant thesis. I'm more of a hylomorphic Aristotelian I'm in that camp more so than even the emergentism camp. But it shows that mental states cannot be explained by conditioning alone. And then the self-referential collapse, this is essentially the logical basis that all of this debate's going to hinge on, is that one cannot rationally affirm determinism since belief in determinism is due to prior states, then it too is a non-rational belief that cannot be rationally or universally justified. And so that is my opening statement.
All right, thank you. Zina, go ahead.
Hi, so yeah, I just wanted to clear up like a couple things about my framework and like what I mean when I say that I'm a determinist. I don't mean that like everything in the universe must have some like specified cause, that everything is predictable. Instead, that in any circumstance, any event is either caused or uncaused. And when we look at the self specifically, we're going to see that like when we look at any like thought that we have, any want that we have, and thus any action that we have is going to result in some kind of external cause, right? So essentially what I'm saying is that free will is the ability to have done differently or to have chosen differently in any certain instance in history. Or if we were like to rewind the clock to like, 10 minutes ago when we sat down here, you could have just risen your hand, right? But we know that could not have happened metaphysically, right? Because you didn't. And if we hold all events constant and all variables constant and all like the environment constant, in that moment, you did not raise your hand because there was no cause, right, for that to occur. And if you do something randomly, that would mean that by definition it has no cause. So it's either that any event is caused or uncaused, and that cause, when we push back the chain of causality, is going to result in something that is either like your brain or your nurture. People who kind of study just like the way that we have evolved as human beings have kind of found that this idea of free will is a feeling that we have. It's a sense that comes kind of like after the fact when it comes to like action, where we feel like we have some agency because we have developed the ability to create a conjunction between this idea of like the past, the present, and the future. So, as we evolved, the organisms that were able to say, hold on, wait a minute, yesterday I did this and today I want to do that. They were able to strive for different goals, achieve more, and that's kind of just going to be like reminiscent of like intelligence and things of that sort. So essentially, it's just that if there's nothing that internally, right, is uniquely kind of causing your actions or your thoughts. Instead, your thoughts prompt your actions, but your thoughts have some cause that are either due to some type of biology or some type of nurture. This is kind of like the whole field of psychology, the nature and nurture debate. And then, there are many different angles we can take this from. It's pretty simple, so yeah.
Okay, if you guys want to just get into it, it's open conversation. So
yeah. So in regards to your claim that free will is basically some type of feeling that we have, would you agree that you are parodying like epiphenomenalism?
Sorry, what's epiphenomenalism?
Epiphenomenalism is essentially that consciousness is something that is a byproduct of neurosynapses, brain activity, and it's not an emergent property, right? So emergentism is kind of the state of neuroscience right now, and determinism was really couched in epiphenomenalism. So it's an epiphenomenon of brain activity. It's a sense that you're free, but it's not actually you're free.
So
that's called epiphenomenalism.
I think there's a distinction between consciousness in of itself and free will. I think that free will is an illusion, correct? We're still a little bit kind of murky on like the nature of consciousness in of itself, but I do believe that free will is a feeling rather than something that is true, something that you can locate, et cetera. I think that instead it's kind of like our conception of like these processes and like the ways that we interact with the world.
So you're arguing that the only thing that exists is materialism, right?
Like the material world?
The material world, right?
I don't think I have to posit that to make my claim. Not necessarily. I'm simply
I'm asking, what is your claim? Are you a materialist?
I don't think I have to, like, I haven't completely refined like my ideas on kind of like materialism versus idealism. I would probably be a materialist, but I don't think I have to, that entails this conversation or it's necessary for the conversation. So.
Well, the idea is if you're assuming materialism or any sort of epiphenomenal understanding of free will as some type of experience that's not rooted in actual consciousness or human agency, it's a circular argument because you're appealing to materialism, your brain, to come up with the universal truth statement that everything is determined.
Hold on, I'm not appealing to the brain. I'm saying that like...
Now, how do you come to your knowledge claims?
Okay, so I'm saying that our brain interacts with our environment, right? And that is what creates our wants and desires. And those two things, like for example,
That's compatibilism.
No, that's not. That's how like people make decisions, right?
But
so
that's called compatibilism.
No. So compatibilism is the idea that free will is when you act in accordance with your wants.
Yes, that are shaped by the external environment.
Yeah, and then
that's exactly what you just said.
Yeah, and then,
exactly.
and then
Thank you.
Determinists also say, right, that we are also shaped by our wants, but free will does not mean that you act in accordance with your will. It means that you would have some agency in the moment to do whatever you want. In regards to like compatibilism versus determinism, we actually agree on the same facts of reality. We just define free will differently. So yeah, compatibilists would also say, yeah, you're a product of your environment and your biology, just as a determinist would.
Yeah. They just changed the semantic word of freedom, and they say that you're making choices amongst conditioned responses. That's what compatibilism is.
Okay, awesome. So there's a difference there in like
that's why
what should be determined free will.
Okay.
So
let's get into epistemology. How do you? Okay. So are you believe in objective truth?
That there is objective truth?
Yes.
I would say that like we can't make claims onto reality as it absolutely is. I think that like our kind of faculties...
Isn't that what you're doing right now?
Hold on.
Isn't that what you're doing?
We make assumptions every day, right? That like the world around us exists. So we can do things like science, right? And psychology.
And that's induction,
Yeah, it's an assumption, right? That everyone like acts upon today. We don't really know what the world exists outside, what it looks like outside of a human body. We know that, like, for example, ants don't see the same things as us, neither do, like, insects. Like, even the color schemes that we see are different than animals. So we know that, like, objectively, the world does not look the way that we see it, right? But we assume that it exists to interact with it, for ease, et cetera. That's how scientists come to conclusions. There are baseline assumptions, right, to engage with any of these practices.
Yeah, but science is also appealing to the laws of logic, the law of identity, and all these different things. I asked you a simple question.
But they all lie on assumptions, yeah.
No, they're not assumptions. So you don't believe that 2 + 2 equals 4.
We rely on the...
Does 2 + 2 equal 4?
We rely on the assumption.
Does 2 + 2 equal 4?
Can I answer your question? Because I don't want it to be a debate where like you're going to interrupt me and we can't have like fruitful discussion.
If we can, just allow people to finish their...
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So relying on the assumption that everything around us exists and things of that nature, I completely agree that there is some truth that we can find. But you must agree upon reality as the basis, right?
So... regarding objective truth, I want to just hammer down what exactly your epistemology is. My
epistemology?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that in general, I don't think we can say that something is objectively true because I don't think we can truly see reality as it truly is because we already know that our faculties of experience, our senses are set in some way that we know other animals already don't have, right? So we can only trust like the human experience and like what like patterns that we recognize across the human mind, but we don't exactly know what it could look like outside of a human faculty of like perception. Do you understand what that means?
Yeah, which means that you just refuted yourself to make it. You're making universal claims right now.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, so this debate...
You're making universal claims.
We're not having... Okay.
You just said free will doesn't exist. Now you're cutting me off. So why don't you stop and just relax for a second? Because what you did is you just fundamentally contradicted yourself by saying that all we do is we have experiences of our environment. We really can't make universal truth claims. And then you're coming here to actually make a universal truth claim by saying free will doesn't exist or free will is just an experience or free will is epiphenomenal. And therefore, you've already undermined your own epistemological foundation and leads to the inability to have any sort of rational inquiry.
So for any conversation that you have, usually we have some subliminal assumption that relies within the conversation. For example, if I'm just let's say I love the Hunger Games and I'm like, Katniss is like the best. She's the best ever. She is the best huntress ever, whatever. You could be like, oh, you're making a universal truth claim. Oh, no. But actually, in that conversation,
that's a preference.
What is entailed,
that's
right?
That's a preference.
Yeah, right? That's a preference, but it's a statement.
No,
right? It assumes that she's a person.
You realize there's a difference between universal truth claims and preferences,
Can I finish my point?
Let her finish.
Thank you.
Let her finish.
Right, so in that conversation, there's an assumption made that we're presuming that, we're making the presumption that these people, exist at some sense, I guess, of being like fictional characters, right? But there's an assumption there that you're making. So I think the most correct way to say that would be like assuming or like knowing that she's a fictional character, Katniss is like the best huntress ever, right? But like whenever we're in a conversation, whether it be metaphysical, whether it be philosophical, political, there are some underlying assumptions made to make any claim. The underlying assumption with this claim that I'm making is that free will is an illusion, right? So, but
that's a universal claim.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
You just said it's an illusion.
What is a universal claim?
A universal claim is when you make a fact or a truth claim that is universal.
Yeah, no. So it would also mean
that. That's what it is.
Do you see it as synonymous with absolute claims? Do they see that as like a distinction
between
absolute claims and universal claims?
those would be the same thing. An absolute claim would be universal.
Right. So I would make a claim if you want to make it synonymous with like something that just like has to be true. I think that we don't know that anything has to be true unless we like presume that this reality as we live in it is true. Do you understand that?
Yeah, but you just again said there's no point in a debate because
I never said there's no point in the debate.
Your premise, the worldview, every paradigm has premises and presuppositions built into it. This is called presuppositionalism. And so your presuppositions contradict the ability to make the claims that you're making.
You understand that scientists do this like all the time,
right? It doesn't.
Scientists presume
you don't have a worldview that allows
accurate
science.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
Scientists acknowledge this. Yeah, they do.
No, I'm very aware.
Do you know what the law of causality is?
Oh, yeah, I know what the law of
what's the law of causality?
You tell me. You're the one that's bringing it up, right? You're the one that has it written down on her paper here so she can look down and read the definition.
Okay, it is here. But people, you have notes.
These are outlines for your worldview.
They're different.
I don't have definitions written down.
Anyway, the law of causality essentially says that every event has some cause, right? If it doesn't have a cause, it's random, right? We make all these claims assuming that we can make some type of like statements on reality, presuming that it exists, right? Scientists must presume that reality exists to make the claims that they do. So in the circumstances of this debate, I'm going to presume that reality exists, and therefore I'm going to make the claim that any event is either caused or uncaused. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but it's still, you have no epistemological foundation to make an actual claim.
Epistemology has to do with what
do
we
you
can
know what
know.
You're a senior. I have a PhD. I exactly know exactly what epistemology is.
So it's the study of knowledge, what we can know, et cetera, right?
Exactly.
So even in that gives us a framework for knowledge, right? It is the framework that we use.
And I'm saying that you can't make universal knowledge claims within that paradigm.
I don't think I am making a universal knowledge claim.
Does free will exist?
No.
Okay, then that is a claim. So at no point
presuming that reality exists, yes.
At no point right now, in the future, in the past, free will has existed, correct?
No.
It has or hasn't?
It doesn't exist.
Okay, that is called a universal truth claim. So you just made a universal truth claim. You just contradicted the fundamental premise of your worldview.
That claim exists overlying the foundation, this idea that reality exists, right? But that's an assumption, right? So we make baseline assumptions that you exist, that I exist, that I'm not hallucinating right now.
So your whole presentation is an assumption.
Yeah, it's just like we do this every day.
No, it's not, because I believe in the laws of logic.
You can say that you know that you're not a brain in a vat right now, right? And I don't think that you are, right? I choose to believe that you're not because all the evidence I have, navigating this world, right, points to the fact that we all exist, that we're all agents, right, et cetera, right? So I make this presumption, but it's a very, very testable presumption, and it's almost fact. Gravity is also a theory, but I believe in gravity because it's testable, right? So just because something is an assumption does not mean that we can't use it or that it's not justifiable in any way.
Yeah, it does actually mean that it's not
Do you not believe in gravity?
That's now.
Do you
believe in gravity? That's a non sequitur. It's a really dumb argument that you're making. So what?
Okay, so you understand theories can hold true.
But theories can actually be built on logical basis.
Yes. And so does this one.
Okay, so where do you? So how do the laws of logic exist? Because these are non-physical things. Yeah. I'm curious what your cosmology is, because if you believe in the Big Bang, and you believe in material evolution ever since then you can't appeal to things like what are called philosophical transcendentals. You can't appeal to the laws of logic. You can't appeal to number theory. You can't appeal to all these different things because they're non-physical and they're universal and they're unchanging. You can't have Let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish.
You're right. I'm sorry.
You can't have non-changing, non-physical things in an entirely materialist universe. This is a known thing.
I'm not posing any idea of a non-changing thing.
That's my point.
Okay.
That's exactly my point.
Awesome.
Do you understand?
So
what do you think my argument is? Because it doesn't sound like
that free will exists and that we're we are causal agents.
Without free will, there is no reason.
Right,
rationality depends upon the ability to choose between things.
Right. So I think that human beings can develop rationality and pattern recognition, but the cause for that is determined. Right. You can someone can learn and learn to read patterns or learn to make connections to things, but the causes for that person to get to that point of neuroplasticity is determined. That's what I'm saying. So you can have a want, you can have a desire, you can act on that desire. You can be forced against acting on your desire, but those desires are things that you don't choose. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and my point is that if that's the case, then being here and trying to persuade people to your worldview
Do you have any
makes no sense.
contention with the actual view, though? Because you
Yeah,
keep saying,
I've laid
here's
out.
the consequence.
I laid out
Okay.
multiple points
So
about how your paradigm makes no. Let me finish. You just talked. Let me finish.
No, I didn't get to finish. You kept speaking.
What?
I think it
wasn't
was
done.
her turn to talk. Let her finish, and then go ahead, David.
Uh-oh.
Or sorry, Patrick, my mistake. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So my view is that, which you haven't attacked whatsoever, is that wants, right, are not coming from this individual. Instead, we can find some type of cause, right, that extends outside the person, that terminates outside the person, right?
Yeah.
Do you have an argument against
Yeah,
that
actually,
point?
multiple neuroscience experiments has demonstrated that, again, dealing with Libet and dealing with these resting potentials has shown that people can actually prevent a series of, or a cascade effect from the actions occurring, which demonstrates a sense of agency. This is why you are not in step with the contemporary neuroscience.
No
You're not
one's
in
saying-
step in contemporary psychology. You referred to psychology earlier. Those fields do not uphold a deterministic
Yes,
worldview.
they do.
No, they do not.
So no one's
No,
saying-
they do not. And so
No one's saying that, for example, we can have a lot of people in poverty that are born into poverty and persist in that cycle. And you can have a couple people rise out of that poverty by some mechanisms, right? People can act that's in ways that seem to be unpredicted. But we're saying that reason that they did choose or did not act in the way that most people did is also determined. For example, let's say, you're born into poverty, but you had an IQ of 130, right? So you're just smarter than the average person. You're able to excel at school better than other people, and thus, you somehow became a millionaire. We're saying that the reason that you were able to rise up out of that position is not because you just pulled yourself out of your bootstraps, but because your IQ was higher than the average person, and that predicted success. That's what we're saying.
Okay, but still, I'm not arguing that external conditions don't affect people's lives and have influence in people. Of course it does.
I'm saying that's what makes a person do.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not. And
what
there's
is?
multiple. Let me finish. And there's multiple examples. And so even the entire ascetic tradition of monasticism and people actually renouncing and struggling against passions would actually insinuate that agency, free will and human agency exist, and that they're not totally dependent on external factors that are determining what they do here or there, and demonstrates. And this is where the latest research in neuroscience actually is.
So no one's saying
tell
that-
me what experiments in neuroscience
Right.
validate,
So,
because I'm
once again,
literally looked at all the research.
entire nature and nurture debate. If the cause of someone's action does not come from their nurture, it comes from their nature, right? So this could be biology. This could be for example, we can look at Phineas Gage, I believe his name is. He had some type of pole that went through his eye and through his prefrontal cortex.
Yep.
I think it was around his amygdala, and it caused him to act erratically, and it caused him to act impulsively, and he was doing things that we consider bad. The reason why is because there's something in the brain, right, that controls your impulses, that controls your sociability, etc., right? And so it kind of comes down to, again, these things that you inherit, right, biologically. Sometimes, though, it also comes from things like socialization. If you're in a household that is abusive, you can end up finding yourself acting in ways that are socially uncohesive, in ways that we don't want. So I'm saying that even if someone does rise against what we call their biology or their socialization, the result or the reason always comes from they're either one or the other, the biology or the social.
So why is the abuse bad?
Because I personally don't think that it's okay to.
So
hurt
it's just a
people.
personal belief. It's just your preference that abuse is bad.
I think that. So are we going to switch to a morality debate, or do you want to stay on the
It's
topic
all the
of-
same thing.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No,
It's
it's
it
not.
all again. There's only three legs
No,
to
it's not.
worldviews.
This is
okay. It doesn't matter. Okay, then go into morality.
No, I don't want to go into morality.
Yeah,
We're
no,
talking about
we
free
are.
will.
We are.
No, this
Yeah.
is a free will debate. so-
Exactly. Well, morality entails free will. What are you talking about?
No, you don't have to talk about.
Yes, you
morality.
do.
You do not need to talk about
Yes,
that
you
ethics.
do.
This is you can
This
talk about
is
this from
you.
a purely neuroscience
No,
level,
no,
or you
no,
can talk
no.
about it from
You're
philosophy.
not. You can't come
don't
here and
have-
debate determinism
Yes,
and
I
then
can.
and then refuse to even
That's
engage with
a
morality and
total
ethical
pivot.
discussions.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I feel like I haven't been able to. What causes people to act the way that they do?
It's a series of factors. They have their own human agency. Again,
Can you
nurture
explain
and
that? Any proof or evidence of that?
Will you let me freaking talk? I mean, I say one sentence and you're already cutting me
Let him
off.
finish if you can. Go ahead.
So again, there's multiple factors that contribute to the way that people exist in the world. Human agency, again, nature and nurture. All these things are included. It's not one or the other. And the idea that we have to just restrict our our defense to just one particular one. That's ridiculous. That's not how the world works. It's both and.
Okay.
There's multiple factors that contribute that shape to a human person, their parents, trauma, environment, genetics, all these things are included, but that doesn't deny that people have human agency and free will. And so if free will doesn't exist, you cannot make any moral claim because nobody is morally responsible. Nobody is ethically responsible. And this would be true for the history of injustices. This would be true for the patriarchy.
So I just want to keep...
Can I finish a thought? That would be true for patriarchy. That would be true for SA. That would be true for reparations. That would be true for slavery. All these things entail that there is some type of moral arbiter that differentiates between good and bad.
Okay.
Your worldview does not allow that to even occur.
What is this human agency? Like, can you just define it for me? I'm clueless. What is that?
Yeah, for me as a Christian, it's being made in the image of God, Genesis 1:26.
All right, so every human has this human agency. It means you're made in the image of God.
Correct.
And God gives you this human agency, correct?
Being made in the image of God, yes.
All right, so if every person gets this human agency, they're given at birth, essentially, right? So what makes some people's human agency act differently than other people's?
We just said there's a whole contributing list of factors.
All right, so the other factors you labeled had to do with nature and nurture, the biology and the environment. You talked about
those
parents.
are included.
Right. So if these two things that we agreed already are fixed, right, our biology.
They're not fixed.
Yes, they are. You don't control the biology that you inherit.
Your environment changes.
Do you control the biology that you inherit?
Well, biology.
Yes or no?
Biology is
Yes or no?
fixed.
Okay,
your environment is not fixed because you can change environments.
So
that was a dumb argument.
Guys,
that was a dumb argument.
Let each other finish. Go ahead, finish.
That was a dumb argument because biology, but we're talking about nature and nurture, and so environments can actually change.
Okay, so your biology is fixed, right? So what would make someone want to change their environment? Just like give me an example.
They want new scenery.
Why would they want new scenery?
You tell me. You have to ask them.
No.
You have to ask them.
Okay, right. So if we were look at the reason why someone has a preference for new scenery, we can look at things like just like what they're like kind of exposed to at a young age. For example, like if they grew up around beaches, maybe they would like beaches. Or it could just be like the things that they've been shown like through TV, media, etc. All the stimuli. However, at this young age, where all these core beliefs are being like kind of taught to you and instilled in you, you don't control any of that, right? Your preferences are made at this like a younger age. We see this idea of core beliefs come up a lot in psychology, where like your deepest beliefs about society and yourself, who you are, this illusion of free will and the self comes about a lot of times when you're younger, right? So even now when you have the agency now to change environment, which you don't really have that agency when you're like 2 years old, let's say you're like 20 and you can move, that preference that we're talking about to change scenery or to fly to Paris comes from determined, right, like circumstances. That's what we're saying. In any given event, we keep asking why you wanted this thing or why you did this thing. It is either coming from like some internal, like some nurture, right? Something like that has been like experienced, or from someone's biology. That's what we're saying. And once again, this human agency, you haven't explained in any regard how this thing, like if it's first of all, if it's given to you from God, how is it yours? Like, how did you choose your human agency? Number one. And number two, when we look at how it interacts with your biology, if biology affects your human agency, we know that that's fixed, that's already out of your control once again. So it comes down to the same
That doesn't
problem.
mean that, again, but that's a non sequitur. There's a logical non sequitur to say just because your biology is determined, that limits or curtails all human agency. That makes no sense.
What is human agency? It's your
the
design.
ability to have free will, the ability to make decisions, rational deliberation, moral responsibility,
Can you define,
love. These types of things actually insinuate free will.
You're begging the question and defining free will. Free will is free will. Agency is agency.
That's not begging the question.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Human agency and free will mean the same thing. Can you give a distinction?
Exactly. But my
point is... So you're saying human agency is human agency.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
And you're not explaining
any
reason why we have that.
Okay, I'll make an easy argument here. You cannot have rational deliberation. You cannot have moral responsibility without human agency and free will.
You definitely
and therefore,
can't have...
Let me finish. Yeah. And therefore, you can actually not have a universal epistemology or make universal truth claims. You cannot make moral and ethical truth claims, which is the point, and that's why you're already shying away from getting in any type of moral ethical debate, because you have no leg to stand on in regards to deliberating and differentiating why white people did this in history, why this is bad and this is unjust. You have no basis to actually define those.
Okay, so once again, you still have not proven why it exists. You're saying if it doesn't exist, then this.
Exactly.
That's not an argument
no,
for
that's actually logical.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Anyone can like go ahead and like pull up their
You can't have knowledge without it.
So,
you cannot have knowledge. You cannot sit here and make knowledge claims.
A reason would be some type of evidence evidence or proof that something exists.
It's to the
You have
exclusion of
said
the
that
opposite.
Nope.
Yes,
let
it
me
is.
continue. So to give a reason for something would be, oh yeah, human agency exists because we can look at this and this proves it. Or,
Okay,
we can
neuroscience.
look at...
The arguments that demonstrate when people reach a threshold, they're able to stop that.
I didn't get to finish. Thank you. So...
God.
Okay. Anyway,
make
so
no
when we look at
sense.
human agency, you have said that the outcome would be blank. We can talk about moral responsibility. I would love to do that, but human agency has
good.
still not been evidenced by you. You're saying that neuroscientists have found, right, that I don't actually know how your neuroscience. Like, we can actually talk about your neuroscience claim. If
To
you
the
want.
exclusion of the opposite. These are using laws of logic, right? So if free will doesn't exist, you can't have knowledge claims. If you can't have knowledge claims, then if there is knowledge, therefore free will exists. That is
not true.
And again, I can just use easy syllogisms. Do you have a
That's
syllogism
not
for
true.
determinism?
I
Do you have a
one-
logical syllogism that actually you can?
I do. Actually, I do.
Okay,
I have
let's
one
hear it.
in relation to
Let's hear it.
God, but I do want to touch on this neuroscience point. How do you think that neuroscience entails or like free will?
Because there's been multiple experiments. This is, again, getting back to David Schurger's 2012 article, RP as Neural Noise, have demonstrated that when these neurological effects reach the cascade point, that a determinist would say, okay, now they have to do the action. We have multiple experiments to show that people can choose not to. And the fact that they can choose not to do it demonstrates they have some type of agency against the deterministic framework of the brain and neurological processes that you would argue.
Determinists are not saying that you are bound by like your inherited biology.
It depends on who you're talking about, and you're making a generalized claim. Okay, so don't say determinist then, because actually
I would
many
assume that when you
determinists
come
do.
into this debate and you give me like some type of like refutation, it's like tailored to me and like.
Well,
like
you
what I'm
have
saying, right? So
you've made
you've made
multiple
some general
contradictory
like blanket like statement and said it replies to like determinists.
Well,
I'm saying
that just
determinists don't
demonstrates
have
human
to.
agency. You
No.
asked me to demonstrate
Can I
human
finish
agency.
what I'm saying?
Multiple
Can I
neuroscience
finish?
arguments do
Can
that.
I finish?
You just
Stop
asked me
talking.
to demonstrate
No,
agency.
I'm responding to you.
Full
I'm
neuroscience
responding
arguments
to
have
you.
done
But
that.
This like Andrew Wilson debate tactic is so old. There's so
Andrew
many
Wilson
of you.
debate
Yes.
tactic?
But anyway,
What are you
I'm gonna
talking
continue.
about?
So back to what I was saying. So in regards to like determinism in of itself, not all determinists have to entail that like. I don't think any determinists entail that like you can't act differently than like in some way like your biology predicts. That's not true. And also,
Actually, there are
someone
some
would,
that do.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not mean. You're dating
I didn't
me.
say
So
that.
anyway,
Did I say
so
some that do,
if you're-
or did I
if you're-
say Zina?
If you're bringing in
See,
an
it's-
argument, it should be a refutation
So
against
retarded.
my point.
I'm saying
Anyway,
generally
so-
regards to the
and
argument.
what
You're
that
talking about
means is-
determinism.
so when we
You're
talk
talking about determinism.
reasons-
I said determinism generally speaking. All right?
Okay.
So keep
So-
up. You're like 3 steps behind.
Okay, so when we talk about when someone acts against any type of like biological stimuli, there's still a reason for that is going to like bottom out in nurture. So that what you just brought up is not a refutation against determinism.
It is. The entire field of neuroscience, this is why
No,
they
it's not.
believe that there's human
No.
agency. This is why the philosophy of mind has adopted emergentism and believes that
No,
human
it's not.
agency is an irreducible fact.
Someone choosing against
So
some
you're
type
saying
of
that's not the
biological
case in the
proclivity.
philosophy of mind right now.
I'm saying that what you're
no.
saying does not
In the philosophy of
entail
mind, you're saying
free
that's
will.
not the case. The majority of philosophers in the philosophy of mind do not believe that human agency is an irreducible fact.
I think that if they mean it in the
No,
compatibilist
let's talk about the
sense,
field.
No, if we talk about a field,
Yeah.
if they mean it in the compatibilist sense, that might be true. I think that a lot of neuroscientists and a lot of philosophers are like compatibilists, but I don't believe that they believe
No,
in this,
they
like,
are not.
No, I know for a fact actually most philosophers don't believe in libertarian free will. That's been like it's been debunked.
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
Yes, yes, it is.
No, it does. Okay, you're just making shit up right now because this is not even the case of
You
academic.
can look it up.
I actually write academic papers. I actually
That's
write
fine.
books and stuff. So I
That's
actually
really
deal in these
depressing to me.
circles and I deal with
That
philosophers.
makes me happy because it must
I
not
d-
be that hard. Sorry.
Ad hominem already. Wow. So we're off to
You
a great
almost
start.
called me the R word earlier.
The
so
R word? What?
Yeah, I heard.
Oh, retard? The R word.
I don't know if that's
Oh
supposed to
my
be. We can get back
gosh.
to the
Oh
debate,
my
Joe.
gosh.
You guys want to
Did
debate
your
the R
Fifi?
word,
Yeah,
or-
did your Fifis get hurt?
I didn't say I was hurt.
Well, it sounds like it.
It sounds like you were hurt when I ad hominem to you.
Well, my
No,
point
that's
is that
what
it's a
you're doing.
logical
But
fallacy
I
and
wanna- I do wanna
demonstrates the infutility
Okay,
of
so
your argument.
I don't even want to count how many times you've done that, but it's fine. Anyway, we can get
How
back
many
to
times
what.
I've said an ad hominem?
Yes.
How many? Tell me. How many
So
times have I?
I love
no,
how
tell
you
me.
want to pivot.
Tell me how many
We're
times
talking
have I?
about free will.
That's my
Do you
point.
want to talk about free will?
Exactly.
Okay. So again, if someone acting against any type of biological stimuli does not entail free will, that means that the cause still bottoms out somewhere in like socialization or nurture. That's not determinists don't say that like biology is the end all be all that makes your action. So
yeah, I know. And you have the environment and exterior stimuli. That's part of the worldview.
So when you say that like someone,
but the contrary again, it's necessary of the contrary logical argument here. If there is no human agency, you cannot have true rational deliberation. That's a fact.
What do you mean by true rational deliberation, by the way?
Being able to choose amongst different things and come to true knowledge claims.
Yeah, so you're not going to be the sole agent in like the things that you choose, in like in the credences that you have and the beliefs that you have. That's correct. However, people can speak and have discussions, and someone else, like using like their language, right, to sway your opinion. That happens all the time. So yes, debates can still happen.
So you believe that you're going to persuade people in a deterministic worldview with your deterministic argument that
it's a fact of
it's not a fact. It's not a fact. Okay, let's get into logic. So 2 + 2 = 4. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Is that always true?
What do you mean by always?
It past, present, and in the future. Is it a universal truth?
It depends. Like there's like an entire like debate over like whether we've like found math or it's always existed. Like for example, if there was no one to see it, like in the cosmos, and we had two particles like just like rolling around each other, does that mean two? Like does that still exist? Does math still exist in that context? I think that math is probably something that we like observe and that we've kind of come to use like in a utility sense. But I don't think that I think there probably needs to be someone there counting for there to be one or two or three things. I think it's like there's some utility in math. So I don't necessarily think it's like something that you can quantify in this way of always existing. I think it's something that we kind of constructed.
So you're saying numbers are only dependent upon the things in the world?
I mean, if there's no things in the world, yeah, there's no number of things.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Numbers
are universal. Yeah, numbers pre-exist.
What do you think a number
Logic
is?
pre-exists creation. That's why creation is ordered in a logical way.
Okay, I would probably disagree.
Creation is not ordered in a logical way. Okay, do you believe in the laws of logic?
I think that the laws of logic are like we use them like utility-wise, right, to come to conclusions and to like
So they
see
could
patterns,
be could be false in the future.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we've
asking
constructed
you
a
a question.
system.
Okay, I'm asking you, could they be false in the future? That's what you're saying.
If the laws of physics stay constant, probably not. No.
So you think they are universal? That if the laws of physics stay the same, then the laws of logic
For example, if you make a system, and like whatever conditions that precede the system continue to exist, it will continue to stay true. However, to say that like numbers and math in the way that we have like imagined it has always existed, probably not. It's just a system. For example, today I could say that like, I don't know, like 2 + 2 = 5. And if everyone starts to kind of agree with those terms or whatever, we can make that a system that works. But I just don't think that like
how would that work? Because everything we build, engineering, geometry, all this stuff is based on actually numbers mean things. Again, they're built on logical principles. So my point is, you claiming that if we make 2 + 2 = 5, that somehow we can make that work. Actually, you can't.
More so,
you can't because it defies logic.
I meant in a semantic sense. But like either way, 2 + 2 = 4 exists because it has some meaning that we gave it.
No, it's not. We didn't give it meaning. That we discovered the laws of logic. We discovered mathematics. These things are universals and they're non-physical.
Yeah, this is just going to be like, I don't think it's like an actual tangible thing. I think most things that we see as things are tangible. I think it's an ideological system. I think it works. I think it's for pattern recognition, et cetera. But I don't think that we can in any way kind of like say that like this system existed before humans.
Right, and that's an entirely incoherent worldview. Again, this is what the people that use presuppositional apologetics or even presuppositional philosophy. This is what's called the postmodern turn, is realizing that the modernist project is ended, and the history of metaphysics.
Not free will anymore.
What's that?
I just would really love to talk about free will.
Free will is tied with all this stuff. What are you talking about?
This is like you pivoting and going down this rabbit hole so we never gets to actual...
This is all about free will. You cannot have rational deliberation, objective truth, and moral responsibility without free will. That's what we're talking about.
Every single day.
That's what we're talking about.
That this reality that we live in exists.
Okay, that's great. That your whole thing is a belief based on your assumption.
Yeah,
we've heard it.
That's wonderful. Doing that all the time. And
that's
you can
wonderful.
say that things must be true.
We'd love to hear about your preferences, but that's all they are.
You're only saying that things are true because you don't like the opposite, and that.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that.
You're saying, dude,
the opposite can't exist. If you're right, there aren't objective truth claims.
Can I finish talking? So
that's my
in
point.
all of your arguments, you have not given any actual proof or evidence.
Everybody watching this debate who's
So
familiar
I
with
wanna
logic and
continue
philosophy
talking
knows
now.
exactly what's going on.
I don't
And
know-
shout out to all you guys. God bless you all.
He continues to interrupt me, and I just.
What about this? Do you want to pose him some questions? Do you want to do an
I would
internal
love to do
critique?
that.
Yeah, let's do
I've
it.
been trying to do that. I'm trying to get at that, like, what proof or evidence you have of human agency, and you've given me this neuroscience argument that I've already debunked, and you'll continue to say it over again. But again, how can you prove that human agency exists without referencing, because the outcome of the latter I don't like? What evidence do you have?
I never said
What
it was a
evidence do you have
preference
for human agency?
I never said it was a preference.
What
Let me
agency-
finish.
Jesus Christ.
Just shut your mouth and let me finish.
Of course. Okay.
Thank you. About time. So the idea is I'm using logic to demonstrate that the opposite, if your worldview is true, that we cannot actually have universal truth claims and we can't have
you
moral...
have evidence
Are you
for
going to
it?
let me finish?
Do you have evidence for?
That's what logic is. Do you understand what a debate is
That's not
premised on?
evidence.
Yeah,
What do you
logic
think
is not evidence.
what do you
The laws of
think
logic are not...
evidence is? What do you
Oh
think
my
evidence is?
God.
Just, if you can, please let each other finish,
The
Let
laws
them
of
finish.
logic are not evidence. That's what the entire mathematics is built upon. So mathematics isn't evidence, logic isn't evidence, philosophy can't be evidence. The only thing that is evidence is if I just have a preference that I assume based on my external environment, and then I can come to some type of claim. That's wonderful. That's a really, really strong argument. My argument is that if free will doesn't exist, there is no objective truth claim, and there is no moral responsibility. And even in your worldview, I know that you act and move in the world as if those things are true. My point is your paradigm, the presuppositional paradigm, the lens in which we look at reality through, your presuppositional paradigm does not actually allow for objective truth and moral
If we were
responsibility,
to-
and therefore, by definition, can't be true based on logical premises.
Okay,
Logical
if-
premises are the argument
If
that
we
I'm
could
making.
have turned back the clock 5 minutes ago when, I don't know, you're probably raising your voice or something like that.
Probably.
If we could have done that, could you have chosen differently? If everything was the same, there's no interference, no different cause coming in, could you have stood up and gone to the bathroom?
Yeah, I can. I'm a free agent. Yeah,
Why?
I can make choices.
Why?
Again, for me, I'm going to appeal back to a theological system in which we're made in the image of God, and then utilize that premise to say, if that is true, therefore we can have objective truth, therefore we can have moral responsibility, therefore we can have a totalizing metaphysics
Okay.
that deals with being itself and unity.
So because you were made in the image of God, you have free will. That's your kind of your...
Well, fundamentally, yeah.
Okay, so being made in the image of God means that you have free will. Okay, so, and this like, again, it's kind of like the same idea of like a soul, like this idea of like the agency thing. This is where people say that like it's given to you by God, and then people are kind of like, thus can kind of live with it, etc. The soul, like, do you agree that there's some type of soul?
Of course, I'm an
Okay.
Orthodox Christian. Are you familiar with
Okay.
Eastern Orthodoxy
Anyway,
in
so
any matter?
If that's true, is everyone's soul different? Like when, let's say I'm born, do I have a different soul from someone else that prompts me to do different things, or is everyone's soul the same?
So I believe in a form of Aristotelian hylomorphism. Do you familiar with what that is?
Nope.
Okay, so hylomorphism, these have to do with theories, and this theory is it's utilized more and more frequently in the philosophy of mind. And hylomorphism argues that soul actually gives form to the body. And so form is dependent upon the existence of soul. And that's exactly what we as Orthodox Christians would believe, is that the soul is actually what's giving rise to the body. And so our anthropology as a human being is soul, body, and nous. Nous being the eyes of the soul, the eyes of the heart.
So
be your noetic faculty, your mind, imagination, these types of
is
things.
everyone's soul, does everyone born with a different kind of soul?
Yeah, everybody has their own soul, yeah.
Okay, and God gives it to them.
Of course.
And your soul causes you to act differently than other people.
Your soul allows you to have free agency. It does. Again, the use cause is trying to put it into a sort of deterministic framework of where you're going. I already caught it.
Okay, no, it's not a caught thing. You just
Yeah.
don't like the wording of the same thing, right? But again, so
No,
if
words have
everyone's
meaning.
soul can, like, if everyone's soul is different, what does that mean?
Everybody is a unique person.
Meaning that they act differently, right?
They can act differently, or
Right.
they could act
Okay, so
similarly,
people are
or they could act the
okay,
same.
So everyone has a different soul, and this soul, like, is what is also entailed as like this agency or whatever. But this agency, everyone's agency is different. Everyone's soul is different. So essentially, the soul can prompt different actions and different outcomes in different people. correct?
Yeah.
Okay, if your soul is given to you from God and it can prompt different actions within you than other people, this means that there's something entailed in that soul that you were given by God that is causing you to act differently than other people, meaning that you're not the arbiter of it.
No,
it's
that's
your soul
not.
given
That's a
from
non
God.
sequitur. That actually is not a logical
saying
follow.
that word a lot.
No, well, because you keep falling victim to non sequiturs.
No, it's
and
not.
so,
That logically
just
follows.
because God gave you a soul, or even God foreknows the end of history, does not actually entail determinism.
Yes, it does.
No, it does not.
Yes, it
so
does.
Okay, so you understand that God is outside space and time, right?
Yep.
And so the difference is actually watching the choices that we've already made is not the same thing as making us make the choice.
He doesn't have to
When you
watch
go to a restaurant and there's only certain items on the menu, are you determined to choose something, or is actually there's a set of opportunities to make choice?
It's not opportunities. It's not.
It's not opportunities.
No.
So when you tell me
once again,
how
when
you
we talk
choose
about
when you go to
omniscience, no, right? When we talk about omniscience, right? If God does not need to be seeing everything in linear time to know what will always happen, right? If
Right.
you just look at just like the story of like anyone in the Bible, like Noah from Noah's Ark, he already knew everything that was going to happen, and thus Noah could not have acted outside of God's knowledge.
No, he could. He could have chose not to listen to God. That's
Right.
that's the whole point of being a Christian, is
Noah-
that we're aligning our will with God's will.
God
That's
knew,
the whole point of being a Christian.
God knew that he would not act in accordance with God, correct? God knew that Noah would not act in accordance with God.
God, as outside space and time, knew that Noah would make the choice, but Noah
Yes.
making the choice is not dependent. God didn't force him to make the choice.
Okay.
Again,
so
those are two. That's a
once again,
category. That's a logical
I didn't
category
even get
error.
to make the argument
That's a
yet.
category error.
I didn't make the error that you're trying to. I haven't
That's a
been able to-
category. You said that
I haven't been able to speak
omniscience
yet.
demands determinism.
So again, if God knew, he doesn't have to be looking at this from like a linear perspective of time, but if he always knew, he's omnipotent, omnipresent, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If he always knew what Noah could do, by definition, Noah could not do what God did not know he would do, aka God knew there was some path that everyone was going to have. God knew what their future would hold, what their present would hold, what their past would hold, whatever. There's some future that existed for Noah, and he could not have acted out of accordance with it because God already knew it.
But God knowing does not entail causation of him causing the person to choose
I didn't say that he caused it. I'm saying that he couldn't have acted differently. I do think there is an argument for causation.
No,
but
again,
regardless,
that's a
he could not have
category error
acted
because
differently.
God is out.
Can you do something that God does not know you will do?
God, he's outside space and time, so he's already looking at history as a finished, completed thing. He knows the choices I'm going to make before I've made them, but that doesn't mean that I did not have free will to make my choices.
Can you do something that God does not know you will do?
No, because God's already
Okay.
outside space and time, but again, that
So,
doesn't necessarily that's
raised
not causal necessity.
I just raised my hand. God knew I was going to raise my hand. Could I have not risen my hand?
You could have, and then God would have known that that's what
would
you were
mean
going
that
to
I
not.
could have
No,
done-
it's not, because that's a category error.
No,
You could have
that's
chose
not a
not to
category
not
error.
raise your hand, and God would have known that's what you already chose.
No.
Exactly.
So, by
on your own
definition-
premise, you just
so,
contradicted
no,
yourself. Yes,
so
you did.
We have a past, a present, and a future.
You just contradicted
We have
yourself.
a past and a present and a future, right?
Thank you.
I could not have risen my hand.
Or you
because-
could have, or could not have. God being
that's
outside
not
space and
true,
time would already have
because
known.
I didn't, though, right? So if we look
So?
at that means that I couldn't have. Right? So if we look at like what God knows, if God knows some like events are going to happen, you cannot do whatever he wants. For example, if God knows, let's say tomorrow God knows that I'm going to pick a blue shirt. That
Okay.
means that tomorrow I cannot pick a pink shirt because
But
God knows.
But you're putting
I'm
the
gonna pick
cart
blue.
before the horse, because God only knows it because he's outside space and time, and for him, you've already made the decision.
No, he doesn't already know it. He knows it because he knows it because he's
No, he
God.
knows
It's
it
not
because he's outside
of-
space and time.
No, God
yes,
doesn't have
it
any
is.
conditions.
The
God
action's
does not
already
have any
happened for him.
God does not have
the
any
action.
conditions.
God has already seen
It's
the
not-
action.
God-
Wait, guys, one at a time. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that you're thinking of God in some type of like human perspective, in that someone has to know things by having seen them play out or in some way.
He
God
already
knows
has.
things because he's all knowledgeable.
Sure.
Not because he's sitting at the end of the finish line and looking back
Yes.
and can replay clips.
Well,
That's
my worldview. So why don't you debate me instead of just this general concept?
not
That's
talking about a
exactly
general
what we as
concept. I'm
Orthodox
talking
Christians
about what
Hold on, let
we
him
as
finish,
Orthodox
let him
Christians,
finish.
that's exactly how we believe it to be. Is that God is not a causal necessity for every decision I make. I have free agency, I have free will, and God being outside space and time, being the beginning of the Alpha, the beginning of creation, and the meaning of creation, the Omega, he has already seen the choices that we make.
Yeah,
that
so
doesn't mean that
you're
I'm
just
putting
describing
I'm not
fallacious
anthropomorphizing God,
You're just-
because
you're
that's
putting
not
some-
something that humans can actually.
Go ahead.
That's not something that humans can actually do. So the
Yeah.
idea that that's an anthropomorphization of God is
Okay.
ridiculous, because that's not even how we
What does
understand.
it mean to be omnipotent and omniscient? What do those two things mean?
Omnipowerful.
Okay, and
All-knowing?
All-knowing, right? So where in that definition does it say that God knows everything, not because he's all-knowing, but because he's able to sit like at the end of time and just know all the events because he can see them all. Like, I don't think that that's like, it's not because of some chronological order, but because all knowledge is bestowed to him.
Sure.
Right? So that doesn't mean...
He is the source of knowledge.
Exactly. He's the source of knowledge, and he knows all things that will exist. So it's not because he was able to like watch, in his head, like how everything was, he can do this, but it's not because he he could watch in his head, like all of history play out, and then he knew, okay, she's going to do this. It's because he knows, right? So it's like...
What's the difference exactly?
Right, because you're saying that if you didn't raise your hand, right, God would have known that...
You could have done either one, yeah.
No,
and God
that's
would have
not
known.
true,
Yeah.
right?
How is that not
because
true? You could have done either one.
Okay, so I'm saying that we couldn't have done either one because God knew I was going to do that one thing. There's not multiple realities.
No,
the reality that
God
created
knowing,
for us.
that's a logical non sequitur. Just
it's
because
not.
he knows what we choose does not mean that our choice is totally dependent and he forces us to choose
Can
it.
you do what God does not know you will do?
God already knows the decision I make before I've made it. He knows the
Okay.
decisions I'm going to make in 10 years from now. I haven't even
so
made
the
them yet.
decisions
And
that
that's
you've-
part of the judgment. That's part of the life of a Christian is God made humanity in the Imago Dei so that we can participate in these categories that animals do not have.
So
and so for us, that would include love, logic, reason, truth, mercy,
Okay.
compassion,
So
honor,
the
glory. These are
decisions
called uncreated energies of God, and these are the things in which differentiate us from the animal kingdom and differentiate us from operating purely based on instincts or in a deterministic
the
way that's
decisions that
framed
you've-
through nature and nurture.
Can we
Why don't you let me
have a
finish
cutoff?
something so you can actually
It's been
argue
like
what I'm
2
talking
minutes.
about?
No.
So what? 2
I
minutes?
can't
We're in a
respond.
debate. We're in a debate. Guys,
Yeah.
God
And talk to the
forgive me.
audience.
I said something more than
Talk to
2
the
minutes.
audience.
Oh my God.
Jesus Christ. I wonder if y'all... Anyway. So, again, decisions that you've made, God, before you ever made them, God knew you were going to make them, correct? Before you even made the decision to, come here today, God knew you were going to do that, correct?
Yes, that's where
so
providence
if God
comes in.
knew you were going to do that, you could have not come here.
No, because I've already made the choice from God's perspective. He's
No.
outside space and time. I've already made the choice.
So that means that you could not have decided not to come because God knew before you came that you were going to come here.
No. God's knowledge does not determine my choices.
Okay,
He
so
knows my choices
By
because I
definition,
chose
they
them.
do. So now
No,
you're
it
saying that he
doesn't by
knows them
definition.
because-
It doesn't
If
make
he
any
knew
sense.
them
That's not a
before
logical argument.
If he knew them before you chose them, then he doesn't know them because you chose them.
He knows them
before.
because I chose them, yes.
So you said earlier that he knew them before you chose them. So that was a contradiction.
Yes, but I still have free will and causal agency.
Right,
That's the
so
whole
that was
idea of
so
repentance.
can you acknowledge that
Let
you
him
just
finish.
contradicted
Let
yourself?
me finish. Really, she says a question. So that's the whole
just contradicted
premise of a
yourself.
Christian worldview in regard to repentance, moral responsibility,
I know what that
objective
is.
truth. And so without those things, so it's like you're arguing that the Christian paradigm somehow doesn't allow for free will because
It doesn't.
God's omnipotent and omniscient.
Yes.
And I'm saying that does not make any sense at
It
all
makes
because
total
the
sense.
entire paradigm is built upon the idea that we have causal agency made in the image of God. That's the entire worldview of a
So
Christian.
I love that this is live streamed and also going to be on YouTube, so we can just rewind to the point where you said that God knows things before you make the decision.
Yeah, he's
and
outside
then you
space and
changed
time.
No. Then I want to be able to speak because I've let you.
Then
do your rant.
speak.
Okay. So we know that God knows the things that you are going to do before that you do them, right? And then you said that God only knows these things because you did them. So that is a complete contradiction, right? In
What
rhetoric
I'm
that you just
saying
made.
is
so
his
can you
knowledge.
acknowledge that contradiction?
His knowledge does not
answering my
determine.
question.
His knowledge does not determine the choices I make.
You're not answering.
So
my
just
question.
because he knows the choices I make
You're not
does
answering
not
my
determine what choices I actually choose.
You're not answering my question.
Restate your question.
Is it that God knows things before you? Does God know the decisions that you make before you make them, or does God know them because you make them?
Both, essentially, because again, he's outside space and time. This is a
Okay.
non-temporal form of knowledge.
So it is true that God-
using,
Wait,
you're using
you got to let him answer the question.
You're using temporal frameworks to talk about God's omniscience, and that makes no sense. The
You-
point is, we actually can make free will choices.
Okay.
God knows the choices we're going to make. And that doesn't determine what the choices that we
Complete
make.
contradiction in those
No, it
statements.
doesn't.
Yes.
No, it
So
doesn't.
So you posited that God knows things that you're going to do before you do them. Then that means that if God knows something that you're going to do before you do it, you
He
cannot
doesn't
do
force
anything
you.
Hold on,
other
let her
than that.
finish. Let her finish. Go ahead.
I never said anything about forcing. I said that if God knows the things that you're going to do before that you do them, you cannot do anything other than the thing that He knows that you're going to do.
That would entail a sense of force, that God
I
can
never-
force you.
Hold on. Let him finish.
That would entail a sense of force or a deterministic worldview that you cannot choose to do the opposite. And I'm saying that's not the case.
Okay, so
That's not
God
what we
doesn't know
believe.
things
Hold on.
that you're gonna do before you do them.
That's not-
Let each other finish,
God is
please.
outside space and time, so He knows all the decisions that we've made. We are inside space and time.
So God-
is outside
Wait,
space and time.
Let him finish.
Therefore, at the end of history, He can already see the choices we make, and that is a present reality for God right now. So you keep referring back to a temporal metaphor in regards to His omniscience, and that somehow we cannot make a choice because God already knows that that's the choice we're going to make. And again, that is a logical non sequitur because He's outside the temporal categories that you're using.
So God knows or doesn't know things you do before you do them.
Yeah, He knows.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that He forces me.
So, see? Okay. So
ahead, go
God
ahead.
knows things that you're going to do before you do them. Therefore, you cannot do the things that He does not know that you're going to do. Right. Is that true or just a true or false for that one?
Say it again.
Can you do things that God does not know you're going to do?
No, He would already know the choices I made because He's already seen the end of my life. He's already seen the choices I make. I am
there's
living that out and choosing those as I go, and that's what I'm going to be culpable for. But the end point has already occurred. History has
Okay.
already ended. God is
Okay.
at the end of it.
Oh, wait, perfect. So there is an end point of history, and there are some events in history that are going to occur no matter what, even if you don't know them now.
Yeah, like the second coming of Christ.
Okay, cool.
Perfect.
So God knows what your life is going to look like. There's some trajectory. There are some events that are going to happen, correct, in your life. Just yes or no.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you do anything other than those events?
Yeah. There's still
That
you
is
still
a
have moral
Thank
you still have
All
moral
right.
freedom. You still have
We'll just cede that
free
because
will.
That was
You
a
still have free
contradiction.
will.
That was a contradiction.
No,
and
it's not. Just because
Yes, it
God
was.
knows the things you're going to choose
you-
doesn't mean that you can't have a
can
variety
move
of
to-
choices. When you make the choice, you have options. You have rational deliberation.
we can
you
move
have
to
moral
another
responsibility.
topic. I think I've done enough on that topic. I think that.
Okay, let's
you
get into
instilling
ethics and morality.
contradiction-
Let's get
No.
it's now my turn to ask questions, right?
Really quick, though, let's let some chats come
Okay,
through, and
all
then
right.
I'm happy to get into something else. So we have Chef Dill Pickles. Zina, if there are two rocks and no people around to call it two, are there still two rocks?
Yeah, by our use of language right now, yeah, there are still two rocks.
Okay, and then we have, let's see, we have another chat coming through. Chef Dill Pickles, thank you very much for the super chat, guys. If you want to get a super chat in, streamlabs.com/whatever, if you want to get a message in. Charlie Kirk, DP USA. Okay. Hey, Zina, you said this about me. Definitely Charlie Kirk. Egregious lower region of his face. Do you think body shaming is okay? What if I called you a muffin? Also, what is a woman?
Yeah, so I called Charlie Kirk ugly. I think that in my worldview, if you are like a really shitty person, I'm going to call you weird looking. I think that's okay. And then a woman is someone who identifies with, the traits that are usually tend to be associated with the female sex, but not all females associate with this social category. So yeah.
Okay. Do you want to bite on that, or
I would
not
just
get
be
into
curious. I mean, again, when we start getting into the trans issues, I mean, determinism and the ability to choose and express oneself certainly is going to play a big factor there. So I'm curious how she feels like. Are children determined? Is it by their parents? Is it their nurture? Is it their environment that is going to cause them to then eventually be castrated, potentially before puberty, or they have to go on these hormone blockers? Like, is a trans person actually choosing to transition? Are they determined to transition? How's that work?
Yeah, so this is actually like an interesting question in psychology and sociology, like what makes it so that people kind of are trans. And a lot of times I think that studies, I think it's inconclusive on whether this is like something like biological, although we see that people's brains, like for example, men who tend to be queer tend to have brains chemistry that is similar to women's. And so I think it is also true of like trans women, like their brain makeup is similar to women. So it could possibly be something biological. And then also sociologically, just kind of like, like what you're kind of, I guess like what you kind of gravitate towards socially, the kind of friends you want to make. All these type of things just influence things that you like, dislike, and then that's going to influence like the traits that you want to express. If you like dresses or not, whatever. So yeah, it's just going to be a mix of biology and sociology, like anything else in regards to the human condition. So.
All right, we have another chat here from Chef Dill Pickles. When God sees our action beforehand, he sees it simultaneously during the action and afterwards. Space-time is theorized to be the fourth dimension, completely consistent with the gentleman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any response there? Or?
So, yeah, I mean, I'm going off of the notion, again, that God is seeing our action, or not even that he's seeing our action, but he just knows our action. It doesn't matter like how he's interacting with it, but just that he knows our action, and he knows our actions even from the start of time. So even given that he transcends time, there is some like actions that we are going to take that exist, right? And there is some future clearly that you believe in that exists. And if such things exist, that means that there are some fixed actions, right, that you're going to take in your life, regardless of whether you know it or not. So the way that God perceives these actions it doesn't matter. If you agree that there is some future, some endpoint, and that of your life, and God knows all these actions, there are some actions that you're going to take that exist fundamentally.
All right, and we have one more chat. Did you want to respond to any of that, or okay? We have Jordan Peterson, Kermit the Frog voice. I don't know.
What
I
do
don't
you
know if I can
mean?
do a.
What do you think about white people?
Maybe I should have you read it.
No, go ahead.
So what do you? This is for you, Zina, I guess. What do you think of white people? Do you think white people have culture? Is cis a slur? And then was this a TikTok of yours? Here, I'll pull it up again. Every woman has felt innate frustration and fatigue for men at least 1 million times. Maybe is that something you said?
I don't know what that's referencing.
Okay.
But what do I think of white people? I think white people are people. Fun fact. Do you think white people have culture? Kelly Clarkson exists. Yeah, like
So is that a yes or is that a no?
I get down to some white culture. I get down to some of y'all's stuff, And then what was the other one?
I'll pull it up one more time. Is cis a slur?
No, I don't think so. Not colloquially.
Okay.
Easy questions.
Patrick, you wanted to get into, it sounded like
yes.
something, so we can do that.
So I was wanting to shift the conversation in regards to ethics and morality and how exactly Zina comes to any sort of differentiation between right and wrong. From my understanding, you're big in regards to racial injustices through history, slavery, these types of things. Are you in favor of reparations real quick? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think there's probably some mechanism that we can use to come about.
And within a deterministic worldview and claiming that there's a culture that has a chattel slavery and that they are conditioned through the nurturing process, through the environment that they're in, and they have normalized this as a social construction, which you agreed earlier about 2 + 2 = 5 could be a social construction. How exactly then are you saying that white people should be guilty for something? Because guilty would entail moral responsibility and something that there's an objective justice, a level of justice that needs to be equated.
Yeah. So never once did I use the term guilty, but either way,
I did.
Yeah, but you said that. How are you saying that they should feel guilty? Which I didn't say.
I didn't say you did.
Yes,
I did. So
yes,
I didn't say she did.
But anyway, so regardless, I think that in regards to like reparations, I think that there are some just like values that I think that in society like are just should be held, and that we think that humans are valuable, that no human on the basis of like skin color is lesser than another human being, and thus when there are some injustices that are like predicated on the basis of race, we should seek to kind of eliminate those type of things, those type of structures. But regardless, in regards to reparations, I think that it's not something that like, we need to focus on like feeling guilty. It's more so just like valuing equality and valuing just like equality of opportunity specifically. It's something that needs to be done just like structurally. And then, so yeah, I don't think guilt is a part of the
So why would white people in 2025 have to pay reparations to the black community in 2025 for something that neither of those communities have been a part of?
So it's, first of all, the system that we're talking about is not like, it's generational. So it's not saying that like white people out of their pockets need to be paying black people in any sense. That it would have to be something that's like governmentally funded, et cetera, because
Still
the government,
taxpayer money.
Yeah, sort of, but it doesn't have to be specifically from taxpayers.
Well, how does the government get money?
The government gets money, majority of it is from taxes, but there are a bunch of like different like, a bunch of different departments that we have that are funded in different ways, et cetera. But regardless, right, this is something that like was sanctioned by the government, where we had just like slavery legalized, and we also just had Jim Crow laws in an era where black people were economically subjugated, and thus I think it should be something that like the government kind of goes to like fix.
Right, but let's say like 2025 America, we don't have chattel slavery, correct?
Yeah, but we have like generations of poverty.
But why would why would 2025 be superior to any example? I guess we could even go to Libya right now because they have open slave markets, but why would one be superior to the other in your deterministic worldview?
What do you mean by superior?
Well, do you not appeal to one being better than the other?
Like one society being better?
Yeah, so a time in history in which slavery was normalized, would you say that that is equal to a period in history right now where it's not?
Yeah, so
or
I
is
would
it better?
I would say that like when we talk about morality, I guess you're asking about my moral framework. I see it as like society like collectivizes upon different views that a lot of times throughout history tend to coincide, and we haven't been able to prove any the truth aptness, right? Absolutely of like moral claims, but there are like but there are tenets that we tend to value over time. So like tenets that I think are valuable are things like, again, equality of opportunity. I'm pretty anti-bigotry and things of that sort. And in that, using that framework, I would say that in a society where we, unalive people based on race, or we subjugate people based on the race, that isn't okay. And so therefore,
why is it not okay?
Yeah, so this is going to be like a moral subjectivist view.
Okay, so so it's just your own personal preference.
Yeah, I think that's what moral claims are.
So it's all okay. So then, if it's your moral personal preference, me having a different moral personal preference, we're equal in standing. Yeah.
So it's not even something to be like debating on base of equality. It's more so of just like one. I think that moral claims are spread based on like how favorable they are, and I think that we should be making certain moral claims less favorable because of their output and their effect. And and the attempt of the moral subjectivist is to move someone's credence or belief towards their own for whatever due reason. So it's like it's not about the equality of certain like moral frameworks or moral takes, more just that like they all exist and they're expressions of usually like resentment or like likability. That's like kind of like what a moral attitude is.
Okay, so why would, for example, the World Cup in Abu Dhabi got criticism because they were using slave labor to build their city? Now, incredibly successful economically, that society, low crime, low theft, low murder. By a lot of metrics that we would analyze, we would say, wow, seems like the utility, if we're just going to make a utilitarian argument, that seems pretty effective. But at the same time, you would agree that slavery is wrong. I would agree too. I'm a Christian, so I'm not in favor of that. But my point is, within your worldview, I don't see how you can delineate between the two, because if you're just going on utilitarian consequences, it'd be very easy to find civilizations that do things that you would find abhorrent, and that utilitarian, that it's actually very, very successful for their society, and maybe that they're more successful than other societies that don't do those things.
Yeah, I'm not a utilitarian. So again, if I was a utilitarian, I think I wouldn't hold the same values that I do now, again, in like equality of opportunity, of respect, etc. So again, this is going to be something where it's like a society is not successful, in my view, and a lot of Americans' view, if they do not, promote, the equality of opportunity and safety of all individuals.
And why is that important? Because I feel like what I'm hearing is that you're getting back to a sort of moral worth of individuals, which I agree with.
Yeah, right.
But I'm just trying to figure out how do you come to, within your worldview, how do you come to the moral worth of individuals?
I can tell you how I've come to these feelings and these opinions, but I'm telling you that like moral claims, in my view, are not truth apt, meaning that you can't like in any way, they're not provable, they're not testable, right? And we've observed this, like again, like through science and evolution kind of shows us that like people who kind of tended to respect other people and like other people, and work together with other people tended to survive more. And that biology, that chemistry of having like mirror neurons and like, just like social ability tended to become more of a prevalent factor in human biology. So I think that's how we can explain where moral claims derive from, but are they truth apt? No, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so would you, since you debase morality and ethics from truth claims, in which fair enough, at least you're being consistent, I appreciate that, because my criticism for your worldview, that now that you've actually justified or argued that you're a moral subjectivist, therefore there are no universal moral claims, okay, fair enough, now I can understand your point of view and where you're coming from. My next question would have to do with, in a world like that, and I would assume maybe you're a fan of like somebody like Michel Foucault with theories of like power, knowledge, and stuff like that. Are you going to argue that the only thing that actually like really exists in the world is power?
What do you mean by really exist?
Like, what is the arbiter of like civilizations? Like, if we're not coming down to universal truth claims, and we're not coming down to universal moral claims, typically the postmodern turn, again, values subjective experience and the construction of your own identity, but somebody within the Foucault tradition would argue that it's about power dynamics. And that power dynamics, and my point to you would be, if that's the case, I'm fairly confident that you're anti-patriarchy, but men have a monopoly on power.
Yeah.
And so if we exist in a deterministic worldview where there is no objective truth and there is no objective morality, how exactly do you get around the fact that if every man on this planet decided that we're going to subjugate women, which again, God forbid, but if we decided to, you have no say in the matter because we have a monopoly on violence.
Yeah, so again, like when we talk about, like someone like Foucault would probably say that like power is what drives like the differentiations between systems and like change over time, socially, et cetera,
Yep.
right? But they're not saying this is some type of like, again, they don't make like a moral, like there's no moral like claim on that.
Yeah, they're
it's just
relativists.
a descriptive fact,
Yeah, they're relativists,
right?
yeah.
So I think that this is a descriptive fact that like men currently, we live under a patriarchy. Whoa, it's really loud outside. I'll just wait a little bit. But yeah, like I think we can make this descriptive claim that like things like power and like and power imbalance drive like change in society, without saying that thus like whatever structure we're in is like good or making some type of like moral truth claim on whatever structure that we exist in, right?
Perfect.
Therefore, so I would say that like we should promote values like social cohesion, like respect, like equality.
Why?
Because I think it's good to value people, and like in that's an emotion.
Why though? They're all determined.
I've
They're
explained
essentially
to you
mechanisms.
this is a descriptive framework, right? So I'm not going to be able to grant any objective moral truth to these claims, and I don't think anyone can do that, even no matter how hard you try. I don't think that's possible. But we can say in a society, okay, we care about people. We care about people's quality of life. Let's make a society that like maximizes that. I think that's what we've done in society like throughout time. If we want like a society with the most power, you're going to get like authoritarian fascism. If you want a society that's most egalitarian, you might see something more close to like communism or something like that. But I'm saying we should put certain values at our foundation, or we do put certain values at our foundation, and that is what builds up the society. The question is what values we put at that foundation, and that's just the question now,
right?
Rather than if it's like objectively good.
And in my estimation, I would prefer a society that uses logic and uses rational deliberation and uses the pursuit for objective claims to make that differentiation on what values we should actually pursue as a civilization, as a culture. And so with my but your determinism, you can't do that.
Yes, you can.
And so my point with the example of if all men decided to team up against women, even using Foucault's understanding of power in the transient restructuring of society and again, power dynamic institutions essentially is what he was focused on. You yourself just agreed that you can't make a value claim against that. You can only have your own personal preference.
Yeah, well, if you look at something like an objective moral claim, I don't even really know what that means, because it would mean like something that is just true because it's true. There's no evidence for it. This thing is just true. I could tell you right now that like Pokemon is like oversees the world, and Pokemon just exists in the cosmos, and they oversee this world, and that's just an objective truth. Why? Because it is. Because if not, I wouldn't like that world or whatever. But that doesn't mean that that's an objective like truth claim, right? An objective truth claim just is true, and to say something like that doesn't even make comprehensible sense to me. So I don't think that we can make moral claims, but that doesn't mean that we can't strive towards certain societies because we value certain things. So yeah.
But how do we come to a collective orientation towards values if if it's a moral subjectivist? If everybody adopted your moral...
We have philosophical conversations like this one, and we provide reasons that might people resonate with. For example, one reason might be hey, you don't like it when people do bad things to you, that hurts, or you don't like seeing other people get hurt. We should stop hurting people. Or hey, this is what's happening in so-and-so country, and we don't like that. Let's stop doing this. So it's going to be belief. It's going to be like credence shifting. It's going to be discussion that moves social order and what changes it.
So it's just the persuasion of rhetoric. So we come to a table collectively, say the example like this, and then through rhetoric we persuade each other.
Descriptively, that is what's happened over history. Yes.
I would disagree. I would argue that there's actually axioms and premises and logical foundations for why we should choose certain things. I understand this is the fundamental contradiction between our worldviews, and that's why it keeps coming back to things like logic and things like objectivity. And again, I understand that within your worldview you can't have those things, and you're saying we don't need those things. We can make quote-unquote claims about the world based on our assumptions of the environment and how they stimulate us and our innate biology and how that affects us. And then you're agreeing that you can't make universal moral claims either. So you're a moral subjectivist. And so you're basically in a point in which the only thing that really exists in the world is power. And in that game, the things that you advocate against, be it slavery, be it reparations, if people in power decided not to, you can't actually make an argument of why it's wrong.
So people in power, like white people when they enslaved black people, they said hey, you shouldn't have rights, but things still changed even though there was a power dynamic there. So I'm not saying that the only thing that exists is power. I never ever said that actually. All I said is that there's no way to prove by definition objective truths or objective moral claims, because in their definition, they don't require evidence, they just exist, they just are moral, they just are true. That's not conceivable. In any circumstance, when we have some type of premise, we either just assume it. We assume that, for example, again, like I've said before, reality exists, right? We assume that to make tangible, discussions, make tangible claims, test hypotheses, whatever. But beyond that, if I want to say, we should all I don't know, I'm trying to give some example. Slavery should become a thing again. People don't say that as some absolute truth. They give reasons why, and it persuades people or it doesn't. I'm saying that we need to push certain ideas and beliefs that, promote happiness and goodness, because I think most people would enjoy that. I think it would be the most optimal society when we value fundamentally, equality of opportunity and in general.
And so how could somebody if free will doesn't exist, how could they be persuaded to adopt a different opinion?
Because we don't have free will right now. However, I can have this discussion with you, and if we have, for example, let's say we both value individuals, but then you're I want slavery or something. I could say, well, hey, if you value people, here's what would happen under slavery. Then I could move your credence and move your belief into believing what I believe is that we shouldn't have slavery, right? So you can still move people's, beliefs
would that
under this.
In your opinion, in your worldview, does that insinuate that people can make choices between two different things?
It wouldn't be a choice between two different things. It would be your brain processing one belief over another belief, and depending on, again, your biology, your brain chemistry, and your socialization, you would pick one over the other. However, if we introduce better stimuli or more stimuli that promotes one belief, you're more likely to believe that, and that's how we get, for example, better people in society.
But if I'm determined, or my innate biology and my environment determines me to choose the opposite of that, aren't we both on equal footing?
What do you mean by equal footing?
That any claim that you make or any claim that I make, they're essentially equal claims. There's no one that can be superior to the other, because due to the mechanisms of how I came to my decision, it's really just a belief that I've acquired, or the word you're using, assumption, because of the environment and the biology, nature versus nurture. And if that's the case, well, then I don't understand, again, the premise of the debate, the premise of coming here and persuading people, because the people that watch this and choose the opposite of you, they're no worse or better than you. It's the same. It's equal. It's just deterministic.
I think it's funny needing to say that one belief in this metric is like yours is better than mine. I think it's just that like in society, I think that all we can do, like at least what I've seen, is take a descriptive lens and look at the history of society and look at the brain and just look at like the way that people act. I think that we have not seen any proof that these things are inherently better or worse. However, that doesn't mean that we can't promote different ideas because of what the outcome would be. For example, if you value human beings, which most human beings do,
Agreed.
Some such system would result. The question is not whether people value human beings. I think a lot of people, especially now, really do value human beings. Most of the time, the argument for slavery was just like, oh, they're not human, therefore we can do blank. Not saying that no one has ever not valued human beings, but many a time they have something like neurologically that is actually a disorder or whatever the thing is. So what I'm saying to you is that whatever system is going to come about, depending on what stimuli we introduce and how we kind of gauge people who tend to have that bad brain going on, and who tend to have like less mirror neurons, things like people who are like really bad psychopaths or whatever it might be. So it's not like a bearing on my claim. It's just like, I think I'm just describing how reality exists.
Okay, I understand that that's what you feel like you're doing. My point is I just don't see how your argument against somebody who would assume the opposite, so let's say me, for example, or anybody watching the stream, how we get to a point in which we can justify one over the other. And so what you were saying, and I was listening to your response, the follow-up I'd really like to hear is like, your anthropology, do you kind of view humans as mechanisms based on the nature and the environment and then the biology in which that they have? Are they a mechanism? Is that how you would describe it?
You can call a human a mechanism or whatever you really want to. I feel like the way that you describe it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
If you define a mechanism as something that operates off of like
Inputs and outputs,
I mean, you can define it that way, but regardless, what we have seen, what psychology has proven, why we have the nature-nurture debate is because people are composed of nature and nurture, and that is the claim that I am making. So the way that you codify it doesn't really matter to me.
So my question then, if we are mechanisms, I'm curious, can I grape a typewriter? I mean, that is a mechanism that's purely based on inputs and outputs. And if we are mechanisms, then I don't even see how you could argue against grape, which again, as I'm a Christian, I believe we have free will, and that violates somebody's volition and consent. So that's wrong.
Yeah.
In that sense. But from your worldview, I don't even see how you could say that grape is wrong, because it's the mechanism. The man doing it was determined, and the woman receiving it, she was determined to kind of be in that situation no matter how she feels about it.
So really quickly. So we don't think that grape is wrong, right? Just because like the person, I think part
when
of the reason
you say we, who do you mean exactly?
I mean, I guess you can just say like in general, I think if we take it from a societal like lens, like even if the person like didn't know what they were doing, we would still didn't know what they were doing. We would still like kind of have a problem with it. But I think one of the biggest reasons why grape is wrong is because someone is negatively affected and they didn't want such thing to happen to them, etc. Right? I think grape is wrong because I value people and I value human beings and their well-being and their safety. Right? So when someone grapes someone, grape. Okay, sorry.
Essay, yeah.
Essay. So when someone essays someone, I would say that like we said that those actions, we don't like those actions. They're bad because they kind of like violate someone's ability to kind of just like freely exist and kind of just like exist like with their bodily autonomy and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. But the solution is not to say like I think we should say boo, that is bad. But the solution is to rehabilitate that person, find out whatever cause caused them to do that, and exterminate that cause. So that's kind of the way I would take something like grape or
what if the cause is
or
biological?
Like yeah, so that's why we have like meds and pharmacy. Like we have things that like we can pinpoint what part of the brain is causing the problem and provide a solution.
So another question. There is an argument regarding, this is specifically regarding like Daniel Dennett and his compatibilism, regarding like what kind of the issue that we're talking about regarding moral responsibility and things like this. And it's called the manipulation reductio ad absurdum argument. And so suppose there's a woman named Alice and that a neuroscientist engineers her so that due to all mechanisms that she is programmed to commit a murder. And she, through compatibilism, again, Daniel Dennett's terms, uses her freedom to choose based on those things. So there's not an exterior reason or cause compelling her to commit the murder. And then she commits the murder. is she responsible or is she not responsible for your perspective?
So yeah, I think this idea of moral responsibility comes from this idea that we are these isolated causal agents, which again, I disagree with. I think that when we look at like when people do bad things, we need to look at, just like you explained, the mechanisms and the foundation that caused them to act in the way that they did. So in that sense, I think that this idea of fault and blames comes from this idea that everyone has this kind of like set state of like, they know the things that they should and shouldn't do and whatever, and they're operating off of this same, basis. So instead, I would say that like that person, I think I wouldn't even reference moral responsibility. I would think, how can we make it so we figure out what caused you to do such thing and stop it, right? So it's like, I
understand, but using my thought experiment, let's say Alice committed the murder. In your worldview, would you find her guilty or responsible, or would you say she's not guilty or responsible because she was programmed through neuroscience, say like a Neuralink, Elon Musk Neuralink or something like that?
Yeah.
Again, what is she?
If you want to go from my framework and
that's what I want to know is like in your
legality,
framework, how would you address Alice?
Yeah, so legality works in a way where it should prioritize rehabilitation and fixing whatever, again, caused the output, right? So, for example, if it's her engineering, you said it was engineering, that kind of sounds like a lot like biology. If it was her biology, something that she was encoded with, we fixed that, right? We give her the drugs that she needs, and then we take her to somewhere where she can no longer hurt people, right? That is the output. So my legal framework does not have to do with like dishing things out because you deserve it. It's dishing things out they're going to fix the problem.
I just want to know if she's culpable. Like in your worldview, is Alice culpable for the murder because the neuroscience engineered her to do it?
No.
Yes or no? So she's not culpable.
No, I don't.
Well,
see
that would
culpability
violate compatibilism because in that hypothetical, she is not compelled by external factors, and she's only conditioned by her internal response in her biology, and therefore within a compatibilistic framework.
I'm not a compatibilist.
So earlier you were arguing for compatibilism.
What? No, I wasn't. I'm a determinist. There's a difference between determinism and
exactly. Well, compatibilism is a form of determinism.
So maybe you can call it soft determinist.
Yeah, it's a sub-branch.
Or whatever.
It's a sub-branch.
But once again, a determinist would say that she is culpable. I would say she's not, because as a hard determinist, not a compatibilist, I would say that even your biology is one of these causes that you are not in control of. You don't author it. And compatibilists agree with that, but they just define free will differently.
So like Sam Harris then, who's a hard determinist, would you argue that so for example, Sam Harris is famous for being very anti-Islam, and he's okay if like all Muslims were, for your position, rehabilitated or like a cancer extracted from a tumor from the world because of the consequences. He argues that the program of Islam, again using a metaphor of a computer or something like that, that software needs to be eradicated. So is that also your opinion?
Do I think that people who practice Islam should be
It's not just about
eradicated?
Islam, it's in general. I'm just saying that for Sam Harris in particular, that's an issue that he uses his hard determinism and talks about Islam as a cancer, as a tumor in regard to like our global society. His hard determinism, because it sounds like what I'm hearing is that you're kind of parroting the hard determinism of Sam Harris.
Yeah, that's
my point is he would argue that we just need to, hold on, just let me finish and I'll let you go.
Okay.
That he would argue that we need to eradicate that group of people or rehabilitate them because the software is cancerous. That's his argument.
So I would definitely say that. So I don't know what parts of Islam he's entailing are cancerous. I don't take that position. I wouldn't. But I would say that if any group of people, regardless, anyone who is committing just like violent crimes or things that we would deem as socially unacceptable, right, we would isolate the cause, right, which is always going to terminate in their biology or their socialization, and we would extract the causes. It's usually going to entail, again, rehabilitation. So I've given you my answer for that. Okay. It's usually going to be rehabilitation and then kind of just like removing this person from a place where they can do that again.
Right. And that's where, when you kept saying rehabilitation, that's where, in my head, it kind of keynoted Sam Harris, because that's the rhetoric.
I haven't heard his argument for that.
Oh, well, that's kind of the rhetoric he uses in one of his books on free will. I remember reading it. It was years ago. But that's the way that he tries to get around, again, the moral culpability and stuff regarding his worldview, because he does recognize that he can't actually justify morality or truth in his worldview, and so he has to develop different systems to try to justify those things.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I just think that rehabilitation is just the most, even like logical way of kind of uprooting.
But how would you, what is, in your worldview, in an ideal circumstance, what is rehabilitation? Because what you would identify as the ideal rehabilitation, I could argue, is like something is negative. For example, I'm not in favor of like the LGBTQ movement as a traditional Christian. And so I could see potentially in a thought experiment where you would say, I need to be rehabilitated because of my thoughts and my feelings towards a particular community. How would you go about doing that?
So if you want to like harm people on the basis of
Don't want to harm anybody.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. So everyone has like the ability to think what they want and feel what they want. But right, if our goals in society are to create a society that promotes well-being, anti-discrimination, and things of that nature, and you have some type of like unwarranted belief against a group of people, I would say that you probably need to be exposed to information that would cause you to no longer hold that belief. I think that's just kind of the same thing that would apply. I think that people should be just like, we shouldn't judge someone for something that like for an unwarranted reason, unless they are like harming people or doing something that we would deem unjust. Other than that, like I just don't see a reason why we would.
Right, I wouldn't be in favor of harming people, but the idea that I have a moral objective structure, that I believe that, for example, sexuality, there's certain things that are godly, divinely intended in certain ways, and that there are transgressions, though, that's just my worldview. So I'm not arguing for you. I'm just saying that, so for me, it's like, it's not about wanting to hurt anybody or, again, violate their free will. But let's say in a thought experiment, and it's kind of already occurring in American culture, that the persuasiveness, if everything is the world, if we adopt your worldview and everything is just assumptions and that it's all rhetoric and we're just trying to persuade people so that their innate biology actually clings onto it and then deterministically moves in the right direction. We're seeing right now, I mean, in 2025, that the support for pride, support for LGBTQ seems to be diminishing. And I mean, the White House, pride parades, I mean, I don't know, again, you're a leftist, so I assume that some of the cultures or the circles that you swim in are a little bit different, but in the circles that I swim in, it certainly seems like, and anybody watching this in the chat, let us know if you agree or disagree, seems like the support for the LGBTQ movement in general has really diminished from the last 5 to 10 years.
So I don't know if you have like some type of like population census on that. I would say that like the government is moving towards like a path that I would say it probably isn't great. But I mean, I don't think that this is going to have any bearing on my descriptive explanation on how societies change. I would say that like from my worldview, someone who values people and is non-discrimination and values just like the well-being of humanity, I would say it's wrong to just hate people for being kind of the way that they are, and that is in a way that's not hurting people. So I mean, again, I don't see how this is like. Well,
my point is, what if this persuasion continues until maybe it's 95% of the opinion? This is a thought experiment. I'm not saying that it like, but that exactly just based to you and your subjective experience, and in a sense, be us who would disagree with your perspective, we would essentially win the culture war, and there's nothing that you could really argue, like there's nothing you can argue against it other than, hey, this is my preference, these are my friends, we should do this. But if other people are being persuaded in the opposite direction, it just seems like you kind of lose.
What you're describing here is what's happened throughout history. We have different dominances of power, of thought, of belief. Sometimes the drive of power in one direction is founded in things like Christianity and some objective morality. Other times it's people being like, I don't like how I'm being treated. You don't like how you're being treated. Let's fight against it. You don't have to entail some objective morality to want some cultural change. You just need some unified goal. And if my unified goal is equal protection, equality of opportunity, general well-being of humanity, and I get a bunch of people to agree with me that is an important thing, then we win, right?
So the true goal, in the opposite as well.
So exactly. So I don't want the opposite to happen. I can express how much I hate that idea, but I can't entail some objective moral truth, because that's quite literally it's improvable in that an objective moral truth would not have evidence. It would just be truth, and if it was so objectively true, it would seem obvious to us because it would be true, right? So again,
I would say from at least the circles that I swim in, it is very objectively obvious in regards to some of the sexual transgressions and things that are going on in that community. For us, we would think that that's quite obvious and quite explicit. So for us, just the observation is...
I mean, yeah, that's how like you can construct a reality based on some belief that.
Well, that's what yours is. You've
I think
agreed.
that's exactly what you're explaining, though, as well here too. Where it's
I'm just
like,
adopting yours and doing an internal critique in regards to...
I don't think this is a critique. This is just an explaining of like a worldview.
I think people watching it understand
So
it.
sure, we can. Anyone who's well versed in philosophy will know what cognitivism, non-cognitivism is, whatever. But again, so someone in your view, if you just objectively believe that God is true, then everything that He says must be true, and you will go on and live in that reality, regardless of if there's evidence for it or evidence for the opposite. You're going to go on living in that reality. I am someone who values science, who values probability,
me too.
Values kind of pattern recognition, etc. I'm also someone who, values other people.
Do you think if you're Christian, you can't believe in science?
Never said that, no.
I'm just asking. I'm not saying that's what you said. I'm just asking for clarification.
Yeah. I'm telling you that I'm saying that I value science. It's just something that I value.
Right.
I'm not making any bearing on Christianity.
And is the scientific method, can it prove the scientific method?
Can what prove the scientific?
The scientific method. Can using science, measuring and averaging, prove the scientific method itself? Or is it an a priori presupposition of how we, using induction?
Yeah. So it's something that we assume to be true based on kind of like how we navigate the world and how we see the world, right?
Okay.
So science is based upon the assumption, right, that reality exists in some measurable way.
Yes.
I think that's a pretty fair assumption to make.
Yeah.
And that's the assumption that you kind of come into debates with, which is kind of what we were wrestling with earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. I just think that without... Again, this is where I would perform if this was getting into a much larger debate in regard to philosophical transcendentals or using the transcendental argument for God. I would appeal to a coherency theory that my paradigm is actually much more coherent and allows for things like science and objective truth and morality to be justified. And that's how, again, using the laws of logic. I know that you argued earlier that logic isn't a methodology to proof, but it is. And that's what I would use to justify that belief in God is actually a superior worldview, because you don't have to presuppose things like the laws of logic or like the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity. Like science is working based on the presupposition that tomorrow will still be the same as today, but that is built on a logical presupposition that science itself can't prove.
So logic and reality or something tangible existing outside of this human experience are all presuppositions we make to believe in science. But that presupposition is simply because we don't have any information that deems the opposite. So I don't think we need to fall into some alternate conclusion because it makes things easier. Because then I don't have to make an assumption. We make that assumption because it makes the most sense because we don't have any evidence of the opposite. So it's more so making sure that we're the most airtight in our descriptions of how things are and how we pattern recognize, et cetera. It's just kind of making the way that we kind of pursue information seeking the most airtight. So I mean, I don't have a problem with those assumptions. I think it's pretty fair to make the assumption that reality is real, that tomorrow will be tomorrow. That is the foundation of science. I completely agree.
Right. Okay. I mean, that pretty much answers some of the foundational objections that I had regarding your worldview. And I think that my presentation has come across in regards to the lack of objective epistemology, the lack of moral responsibility, and that you've granted that you're a moral subjectivist. So my point still stands. So you've adopted a position that coincides with a deterministic worldview that doesn't allow you to justify those things. And fair enough, that's where I granted you. At least you're being consistent. In regards to the ethical and moral component, you being a subjectivist is at least consistent with your deterministic framework.
Well, yeah, I think that in regards to kind of like just like the whole assumptions thing, if you believe in science as someone who is non-religious, you are making this assumption as well that like reality exists objectively, that things that have patterns, that things have causes, etc. And it's a pretty sound assumption to make, especially when we don't have provable evidence of the latter. So yeah, I think that what I'm saying makes a lot of coherent sense. Same thing with morality. We haven't been able to find some truth in moral claims. It's just non-testable. Although we do see that evolutionarily, it makes sense why we value other people. We value human beings. We value people being okay, like well-being, over non-well-being, etc. So I think we have a lot of explanations for why we feel these things. But I think that a lot of times emotivism comes to recognize that moral claims and attitudes do come from, again, this feeling, right, that sometimes you can point to in the brain, socialization, et cetera. So, yeah, I think think that kind of sums up what I've wanted to say.
Okay. You have any counter questions for me in regards to my worldview?
Yeah, I just think, I think if we kind of, I don't know if we want to go back into this, but the agency thing, I do still just have like a really big issue with it, with this knowing that there is some set future, and then also saying that we can act out of accordance with it seems to be incoherent to me.
Well, it's a category. I mean, my argument, that'd just be a category error in regards to God. And so that's the whole point of sin. So we can choose right and wrong decisions. Some of us choose bad decisions, and those consequences follow. And God, Christ, being the incarnate God, has a perfect heart. That heart is the heart that all of us are going to be judged upon. And my agency to choose right or wrong does not diminish God's omniscience. And God's omniscience does not diminish my ability to make a free will choice right here, right now. So again, predictability is not proof of determinism. And it's just probability under limited circumstances is essentially what you're, and that's where my point with the restaurant earlier is like, just because there's limited opportunities to choose on a particular menu doesn't mean that I'm determined for any one particular meal that I choose.
Okay. So once again, I just want to kind of like get it straight from here. Do you believe that there is some future that exists? Like there is a future that exists?
Obviously.
Right. Okay. So again, if there is some future and some events that exist in that future, then those events must happen, and you cannot do any events that would contradict that event. So say again, if there, I don't know what the hold on. I don't know what the future is, and we know that God again still exists outside of time, but we do know that He knows what this future is. Right? We're sitting at this point of the present where we cannot kind of like actually perceive of that, but we know that it exists if we presume that God exists. The question is, can you do anything that is not entailed in that future that God knows exists? Just yes or no.
Can I do anything in the future that God knows exists?
No. Can you do anything like in this set future that God knows exists that...
But He's already at the end point of history, so it's already happened.
Right. That's fine, right?
Okay.
So it's already happened. These events are going to happen, whatever. But in these events that are going to happen, can you do anything other than the events that are going to happen?
If I made a different choice at that point, then it would have been, again, God would have already known what choices I already make. So again, this is a category error because the choices I make in temporal space and time are not determined by God's omniscience of knowing which decisions I choose.
I'm not saying that because He knows is why
well, you keep asking, insinuating. Let me finish. You keep asking if I can choose to do something different. Is that not what you were asking me?
No, I'm not done yet. Though.
But that is exactly what you're asking me.
Right?
See,
but I thought we weren't supposed to be cutting people off. Okay, so see. Okay. Anyway.
Unbelievable. So sensitive.
Okay. Anyway, so if there is some set future that you know is going to exist, it's a simple question. If there is some set future that we know exists, can you do anything that is not in those events of the future? Just a yes or no.
Again, the premise of the question.
Yes or no.
No, that's not. I'm not going to fall into your dialectic.
It's not a trap.
Well, let me respond. I get to respond however I want.
No.
Oh, I don't?
You can be bad faith if you want.
How is that bad faith?
Because you're not.
Do you even know what bad faith means?
It's when you're arguing like disingenuously.
Yeah.
And that's what
I'm disingenuous by saying that God's omniscience doesn't entail.
You're disingenuous by not answering the clear yes or no question.
I can make free will choices. God knows what choices I already make. I can choose different choices in that particular period.
So free will entails that there, in some event, there is a choice that you can make other than another choice, right? There's not some like lineage, even though we're already entailing that God knows some like events that are going to happen in the future, right?
Yeah.
But you're presuming that you can pick something other than whatever is going to happen. So tomorrow, if God knows, let's just assume God knows that tomorrow, even though He exists outside of time, He does still know that tomorrow you're going to pick a blue shirt. That means that you cannot pick any other shirt but the blue shirt. Just yes or no?
No, it's because God knows I chose the blue shirt. Because in His perspective of being outside temporal space and time, that's the shirt that I chose.
Okay, so you couldn't have picked a red shirt then. You could not have picked red shirt because He knows that you're going to pick a blue shirt, so you can't pick a red shirt.
His knowledge doesn't determine my choice.
I'm not saying that His knowledge
But that's the insinuation of your claim.
I'm saying
that's the insinuation.
I'm saying that it's already known, so it's already going to happen that way, right?
It's known by God, but I still choose it in the present moment.
If God knows today, right, or even before you came here that you were going to come here,
sure,
right, that means that you're going to come here inevitably.
He knows that was the decision I was going to make, and he knows outside
So you
space and
couldn't
time
have-
that I've already made that decision.
So you couldn't have not come here.
I could have chose, and he would have
That's a
known that was the
contradiction.
choice that I made because he's outside space and time. He's already at the end of history. He knows that was the choice that I made.
That is a contradiction.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
yes,
Again,
it
the
is.
super chatter highlighted. People watching know that this is kind of a
I don't think I'm
Reddit tier
gonna
level
use-
argument
I don't think I'm gonna use
about
the
God's
people
omniscience. And
watching-
you realize that I'm not a Calvinist, right?
I don't think-
So I don't
I'm
believe in
not
any
gonna
sort of
use-
theological determinism.
I'm not going to use the people watching to determine who is correct or incorrect in the debate.
Well, you
especially
should,
when
because you don't have an
metaphysics-
arbiter
especially when
for objective
metaphysics,
truth.
psychology, neurobiology, and
Sure.
many other sectors
All the
of
things that
science
I've appealed
also,
to.
Not really. They also entail the same fact that first of all, that when we make a choice, right, it is a product of circumstances that we don't have control over. And also, even if we presuppose some like Christian God that exists, if he knows in any regard what will happen, then you cannot do what he does not know will happen. That's a fact.
But what his knowledge is based on our ability to have free will.
It's really just a yes or no question, though. So,
It's going
I
nowhere.
mean,
this is
there was multiple
Return.
contradictions there, but anyway.
Oh yeah, well, name them. What are the contradictions? Yeah,
so
tell me the logical
saying that
contradictions I made.
Saying that God knows what you're going to do before you do it, but also he only knows things that you know that you're going to do because he's seen it before. So
Yeah, he's outside space and time. That's a
Right.
category error.
right, so it's not a category
yes, it
error.
is.
If God knows you're going to do some set things, you can't do the things that he does not know you're going to do. That's essentially the problem with your argument. It's
That's
clear
not
as
a
day.
problem.
Yes, it is.
No, that's not.
Yes, it is.
That's not a problem.
Even if you're not aware in the moment that you're going to do something, you were always going to do that said thing. That's the problem.
No, because you always have choice. But God, being outside
What
space
does
and
choice
time,
mean?
choose between a rational deliberation, choice
there's
between
one-
multiple objects.
If there's two
Choice between the
there's
red
two
and the blue shirt.
possibilities. One is definitely going to happen. One, you feel like you have a choice, it's going to happen. But this one was always going to happen.
No.
That means that you don't have a choice.
No, that's
It's
not.
just a feeling
But
of having
again,
a
that's
choice.
you've already structured it, and that's not
I
how
haven't
Christians.
structured it. That's
That's
the
not
dilemma.
how Christians believe that choice works. The structure that you just drew on your paper.
Two different things.
That's
What?
the
What does
point.
this mean?
Is that you just said because God knows the choice you're going to make, you cannot make any. You basically have no free will. You cannot make delineation between two things. I'm saying no Christian, both Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, believes that to be the case because the paradigm
you're
is
right.
not based on that presupposition. The framework that you laid out is not the framework that we agree to.
Christians-
It's not the framework that we believe in.
Christians don't believe that to be true because it would mean that there's a contradiction in their logic that
No,
is
it's a
there. They just don't want to
contradiction for you.
categorize it, right? So let's say you have a choice between a blue shirt and a red shirt tomorrow. God knows you're going to pick red. You're going to pick red. He knows this. He's always known it. Even when Adam and Eve were frolicking in the gardens, he knew you were going to pick this red shirt on this day. And you're like, blue or red? You're going to pick red, and you were always going to pick red. There's no option.
I thought it
of
was
picking-
blue.
No, it was red.
Now it's changed.
No,
It was blue shirt earlier.
Yeah, well, examples can change. Anyway,
So your argument is essentially the same type of Reddit tier atheist argument that would say, well, if
Reddit
God's the
tier.
creator, who created God? And it's like, well,
I don't
that's a
think that's
category.
the
error.
same argument I'm
It's the same level of argument.
no,
it is
it's
the same
really
level
not.
of argument.
It's really
Yeah, it
not.
is.
I think that a lot of Christians also have come to see the problem with this idea.
No,
yes, they have.
More and more young men and women are becoming Christian than ever
You haven't
before.
answered the contradiction. You just keep
That's
saying
not a
because it is.
contradiction.
Yes,
No,
there
it's
is.
not.
Yes, there is.
The super
There's a-
chatter already recognized. It's
Super
not.
chatter. Oh wait, hold on. The
it's
super chatter
not-
told us it's correct, so it's right.
That's not what
The
I
guy
said
who
either.
paid
That's
to
not what
get
I said
his
either. Is
voice
that what
up?
I said?
I mean,
said
you're
it's
using
only
that as some type of evidence. I don't know why
because
you're bringing
other
it up.
people watching this are realizing what's going on, and you
Other
and your
people that watch this tend to lean conservative. So of course they're going to agree with your framework, and I don't think that I'm going to kind of capitulate to them to arbit who is correct, right? Especially when this argument is so straightforward and just is going to be in the realm of metaphysical possibility. It is metaphysically impossible for you to pick blue if God already knows and has always known and always will know that you will pick red. That is a fact. I rest my case.
No.
You
Again,
just say no, but it's fine.
it's just not consistent with our worldview, and that again,
with your worldview, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. With our worldview, because that would entail again that we have no choice. There is no objective truth. There is no moral responsibility,
That would
as
mean
we've
that
already
there's no
talked
choice,
about.
and that's scary. I understand, but it is true.
You chose to
So,
be here.
I did choose.
Oh, you can't choose. You can't choose though.
Under like a compatibilist understanding, yeah, I did choose to be here.
Okay.
But
all
I
right.
mean, did
All
I
right.
have control over the
All right.
desire to be here? No, I didn't.
Okay.
So yeah.
All
Anyway.
right. Well, I hope this was convincing for the audience because you guys had no choice in the matter.
We will take a break for some chats. We have Chef Dill Pickles. He writes, Zina said that axioms are his preference and then almost immediately said we should do what most people want. Absolutely cognitively dissonant.
Yeah, so never said that we should do what most people want. Definitely didn't appeal to numbers. Said that over time, we generally do, like power is held by the majority, and we tend to structure society based on what like the majority wants. And then also axioms are preferences. No, didn't say that.
There's the message again in case you wanted to address anything else. Or
And it's probably in reference to you saying 2 + 2 could be 5 if we all agreed to it.
Yeah, so if we labeled like what we conceive as like 4 as 5, and we just said semantically now, like that's now 5.
If
yeah.
you're just changing semantics, that again, that's not getting at the heart of it.
Okay,
is
sure.
that is mathematics objective and universal? That was the
Yeah.
point that was being made.
Yeah, so it's like going to be one of like the oldest philosophical debates. Did we discover math or did we create math? Whatever. I mean, I think that like for someone to say that like math as a system exists, it's probably going to entail like utility to some degree. So like it's something that like you're like actually constructing, for example, to divide 10 by 2 to come to 5. Like there's some type of like process or system there that requires humans. However, like the physical objects being there, for example, if there are like 5 meteors in the sky, those meteors are there. So I mean, it's just a very big philosophical rabbit hole. It doesn't negate anything I've said.
we have another chat here. Chef Dill Pickles, Zina, please explain why we should not eliminate first degree unaliving and simply replace it with second degree unaliving.
Good point.
Yeah, so I under my legal framework, right, if someone is like if what I would want, or I think what is most coherent, if someone has unalived someone, right, instead of looking at it in this way that we do, we would say, okay, like what caused this person to unalive someone? Was it intentional? If it was intentional, right, we would look at the cause for that thing. Let's say that they're a psychopath, and we would rehabilitate them. If this person did not mean to unalive someone, we would just kind of like figure out what caused them to do such thing. If it was like nothing at all, like a total something that they like, there's no circumstances that we can rehabilitate. I think we would just see it as like someone who, like for example, if someone broke the law, like we can still have laws under the system where like we can deter them from doing such law and put them in jail specifically because they broke the law and as a symbol of why you shouldn't do it again. So I think that again, like not only rehabilitation but deterrence should be one of like the pedestals of our law and our governance. So yeah.
All right. Streamlabs is not working, apparently. I don't know. Oh, here we go. Chef Dill, Dylan, Streamlabs is down. Zina, what does it functionally mean to be outside of space-time? I can't tell if you're genuinely or disingenuously missing that detail. Yeah,
so it means that you're not bound by time, right? Even still, regardless of God knowing something before or after or during, if something is said to have if something is said to be something that he knows, it means that it will happen because he is God. So I'm not saying that like he must know this thing before you did it, even though you kind of agreed to that. I'm saying that God, in whatever sense, knows that something is going to happen, and thus it will happen that way. That's all my argument is, unless you agree.
And for you, that means determinism, right? That's like a...
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take it to be...
Well, that's what you're trying to use it as, right?
Well,
Correct?
it proves that, like, in any circumstance, something was always going to happen, yes.
Well,
So,
something's
including your
always going to
actions.
happen, but the reason why
Including
you're
your
bringing that
actions.
up is try to insinuate that even in my worldview, believing in God, it's determined. That's the premise of what you're trying to present. And again, shout out to Chef Dylan because he's highlighting that it's a category error.
Nope.
Okay.
God knowing something means that it will always happen that way. It is true. So you can't do the opposite of that.
Okay.
Is that true?
That doesn't mean the determinism.
Okay, whatever you want.
Okay.
All right. We have about 20, 25 minutes left. So why don't we do closing statements, and then the rest of the show, for what time we do have remaining, we'll open it up to some audience questions.
Sure.
We'll lower the READ or TTS threshold. We'll put it to... We'll do $69 TTS because we don't have too much time. So Zina, you go first with your closing statement, then Patrick, you'll go after. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So my closing statement is going to be pretty similar to my opening statement. I think I'll just focus more on kind of the God aspect, though, of how you can take determinism. Essentially, I'm going to just restate my argument. God knows, how the world will exist and what events will take place. Regardless of time, events are going to happen in the way that he knows that they will happen. And thus, you cannot act out of accordance with what God knows, right? So it doesn't matter, like, if we're talking about this in, like, a circumstance of time or not, if God says that blank thing is going to happen a certain way, or blank thing is, it always will be. So thus, if God says, you will pick up this cup, you're going to pick it up, right? That's going to happen. So therefore, this concludes that, like, God knowing every action that we're going to take and every thought that we're going to have, or every thought that we do have, regardless of, like, the fact that he is outside of time, we cannot do anything that he does not know. And thus, there are some set actions that we will take throughout life that he has always known are going to exist that way, and thus we cannot act differently. There's just this feeling or illusion of choice. That's always been my argument. I think that as well, if I want to get back into this neuroscience idea. Patrick was trying to make some type of claim that neuroscientists have seen that sometimes people act differently to, like, biologically, the way that we study it in the brain. Well, yeah, like, we're always going to find the reason for that differentiation in action, like differentiating from their biology to be something that exists in, like, the social realm or the environmental realm. Like, some social stimuli causes people to act differently than we might assume they will based on their biology or their brain chemistry. So yeah, it's either that any event is caused or uncaused. If it's caused, we'll ask, first of all, if it's uncaused, it'll be random, so you don't have control over it. If an event is caused, we ask why. And when you continue to ask why you prefer waffles over toast, it's going to result in something like, because my mom made them for me, or because my taste buds are just in a way where it releases more dopamine in my brain. There's always some explanation, and it just resides outside of this idea of the I. So that's been my argument. Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
As I was presenting in the opening argument, is 7 points logically refute determinism. The first one being moral responsibility argument. So if determinism is true, no one can be held morally responsible because they were determined to do so based on nature and nurture, as we've already talked about. And she's conceded that she's a moral subjectivist, so therefore she really can't make universal moral claims or ethical claims about people, things, historical events. She can use rhetoric, she can state her preference, which she stated multiple times today, but that does not justify, and that is not a strong argument within a formal debate to actually present why something is true or false. Second one is that if determinism is true, then all knowledge are beliefs, including the belief in determinism. And if that's the case, then determinism is not founded on rational inquiry or rational deliberation, and therefore itself cannot be rationally justified. So therefore, set point number 2, if determinism is true, we can't have objective knowledge. Point number 3 is that no determinist actually operates in the world as if they're a determinist. Determinism would violate the idea of voting. Again, I'm not the biggest advocate of democracy myself, but democracy is premised upon the idea of free will and that you can make delineations between things and choose. But she would argue that you're really just conditioned to choose whoever your political person that you want to support is. Fourth argument is that from the counterfactual possibility is that all decisions presuppose modal freedom. And so even though she has a sort of semi-compatibilist, she says she's a determinist, but then she appeals to compatibilism in regards to her ability to choose and be here today, this still insinuates what's called modal freedom. And so it's still, even within a compatibilist framework, we have to evaluate alternative possibilities. And this is true within legal structures. So like our entire legal institution is built upon that there could be something or it could have been the opposite. In her worldview, there is no opposite because everything was determined. Number 5, the neuroscience misinterpretation argument regarding Benjamin Libet. And this research has kind of been followed up more recently with John John Dylan Haynes, arguing again that these resting potentials demonstrate that the brain is deterministic and that things fire before every action we do. And then that's been disproven. Again, I recommend everybody to go look a paper. It's from 2012 by David Scherger. It's called RP as Neural Noise, and highlights that now the kind of operating standard within neuroscience is that these neuronal firings before actions are actually just neural noise, and they're not deterministic structures in regards to behavior. Number 6, creativity and novelty argument. So again, you can't have art, poetry, invention, all these things, moral heroism. So again, I'm surprised she didn't bring up more arguments regarding biology or evolution and the evolutionary constraints in regards to our biology. But art, poetry, moral heroism, people who actually self-sacrifice themselves and kill themselves. This is a defiance against, again, this idea of like survival of the fittest and that we do everything for personal survival. And then number 7 is the problem of infinite regress. And I think this is a pretty strong logical argument against determinism, is that there has to be an unmoved mover. I mean, Aristotle figured this stuff out in classical Greek philosophy. And so determinism relies on an infinite causal chain. Well, where does the causal chain begin? It typically begins with the Big Bang. That's why I brought up cosmology, which she wasn't really wanting to get into. And so free will allows for an uncaused cause within a person. Again, being made in the image of God, the Imago Dei, Genesis 1:26, allows me to be my own uncaused cause within the world through the utilization of my free will. And as I said in the opening statement, the 20th century, this is why determinism has really kind of fallen to the wayside, is because quantum mechanics, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, has demonstrated that Laplacian determinism, again, Laplace's demon, which is a thought experiment, that's not how the universe actually works. And this is more consistent with a theological worldview, because I believe in miracles, right? So I don't believe in a deterministic system. I'm not a deist either. So God's intervention into the world is a real occurring fact. And I would appeal also to number 2, chaos theory, which also mathematically demonstrates the same thing, that we live in an undetermined or indeterminate world. And that is consistent with my worldview as God created creation, and that miracles and his agency can actually still affect the world, while me being made in the image of God can still have free will. Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theory, again, trying to prove determinism based on determinism is impossible. This is kind of what this general problem is why logical positivism failed in the early 20th century. And so the cognitive revolution as well, Skinnerian behaviorism was overthrown in the 50s and 60s, and this was done by, again, linguistic work. I'm not the biggest Noam Chomsky fan, but Chomsky's work regarding linguistics and language acquisition shows, again, that we do have human agency and human free will, and that these aren't deterministic mechanisms. The philosophy of mind, as I said, typically the majority of the field adopts an emergentism, the idea that we actually have a mind. Now, emergentism argues that the collective firing of neurons is so complex that we have an emergent property, right? So water molecules, you can have a molecule of H2O, but until you have multiple molecules, you don't have what's called wetness. That's an emergent property. And so I'm not an emergentist. I don't believe in emergentism. As I said earlier, I'm more of a hylermorphic in the Aristotelian tradition and the Christian tradition. But emergentism is kind of the dominant stance within philosophy of mind right now. And persons from that perspective are not reducible to just physical components. Human agency is not irreducible. We actually have agency. And this is, again, even part of the emergentist school within philosophy of mind. And then self-referential collapse. This is the logical argument. Again, she argued that logic is not a way to prove something, which is just ridiculous. I mean, nobody believes that. That's ridiculous. Well, earlier you're claiming that I wasn't proving something, and I said I'm using the laws of logic to show that the opposite of what I'm saying demonstrates that there cannot be universal knowledge, there cannot be objective truth, and there cannot be moral responsibility. And so one cannot rationally affirm determinism. And even determinists will agree with this. Since belief in determinism is due to prior states, then it too is a non-rational belief. And then she agreed that that's all it is. It's a preference, it's assumption on her part due to nature and nurture. And so it's just a subjective opinion. That's all she really came here with. And therefore, her goal is to persuade you through, hopefully your innate biology clings on to something she said through these deterministic mechanisms of causation, and that you then will adopt and parrot her worldview, and maybe it'll become more popular. But she can't make a claim that it's objectively true or it's superior to mine, because she doesn't have a basis. Determinism undercuts the necessary categories that it depends upon for objective truth claims and moral responsibility claims. So from that perspective, essentially, determinism can't be true, because we're coming here to have a debate assuming that we're coming to a truer answer, a truer response to the things that occurred today. And her worldview, that's not possible. So I feel very confident that the people watching and hopefully people looking into these questions, and maybe you're wrestling with concepts of determinism and free will. These are things that people move through in their own personal journeys towards fuller understanding, philosophical inquiry, theological inquiry, and that essentially they're going to realize that I do believe that things are true. I do believe that people have moral responsibility, and if that's not the case, then everything is haphazard and is full of chaos. And as I said, mathematics and physics, mathematical logic has determined that we do not even exist in a deterministic universe. That mechanism that really developed in the 18th and 19th century is no longer in favor. So that's pretty much summarizes my argument.
All right. We have a couple chats here. We have, by the way, guys, we've lowered the TTS. We're going to do TTS here at the tail end of the show. $69 TTS, but we do have our favorite trucker here who sent in a soup chat. Haul Long Nate, thank you for the soup chat, man. God doesn't determine your choices. He can see the infinite outcomes of your choices. From Nate. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Are you in the middle of a route right now? Thank you, man. Appreciate the soup chat. All right, let me let the chats come through. We have Chaw. One moment. One moment, guys. By the way, guys, like the video if you enjoyed the stream. We have Chaw here.
Chaw XD donated $69.
Thank you, man.
If Reddit atheism and moral subjectivism was a person, she'd be predetermined to go on whatever, incoherently spurg and make category errors. I'm doing it. Also, I didn't choose to send this.
Any response there to Chaw?
I don't know if there's anything intelligible to respond to that with, but yeah.
Okay, we have
Charlie Kirk DP USA donated $69. Zesty Zina, do you think black people can be racist towards white people? Do you think women can be sexist towards men? Why do you wear a cross?
there's quite a few there. If
Okay.
go for it.
So yeah, these are just gonna be like kind of like semantic questions. If you believe that like sexism is kind of like something that like entails like a power structure, then no, women would not be like able to be sexist to men. If you believe that it's just like having like a distaste for men, then yeah, like a woman could be sexist, vice versa to for the race question. And then also in regards to like sociology, yeah, it's just like it's going to be like definitional in how we define these things. So yeah.
Well, what about your own definition of racism and sexism?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that in sociology, it's most meaningful to look at just like what's meaningful about racism is like the power that it entailed. And thus, when we look at like racism as a system that has like outputs and inputs, et cetera, we're gonna like see it as like the dominant race kind of just like perpetuating this system of racial hierarchy. And in this racial hierarchy that we've seen throughout history, it's been white people holding this power dynamic, being at the top of it, et cetera. So
What about South Africa? That would be
Yeah.
flipped, right? So white people are the
White people
minority.
still-
Is there
physical
structural
minority.
racism against the white people in South Africa?
Actually, no. So right in South Africa, even though they were the minority, like in regards to like numbers wise,
Sure.
it was still colonized by white people and taken over by white people for them to have like black people being part of the working class for them to enjoy. So it wouldn't be some type of like systemic racism.
But you just said
towards
it was
white
the
people.
majority versus the minority.
Yeah. So a majority in holding power entailed structure.
But white people don't hold the majority of power now. in South
I don't
Africa?
know too much about like South African politics right now, but even in general, like unless you're going to see like some type of like systemically like racist policies happening in South Africa, which don't see any evidence for. Yeah, it's just like it's another community, just like many in Africa and other communities that was exploited by European colonizers.
And can I ask you a question about voting? I'm really genuinely curious in your worldview. Like, are you in favor of democracy? Like, what kind of political, are you Marxist? Like, what kind of political orientation? And then separately, what are your thoughts on, like, can you vote? Like, in your determinist framework, do you have agency to vote?
Yeah, so again, I think you're making a lot of presuppositions in the question of the voting. But regardless, yeah, I really like Marx. I don't give myself like too much of a label in regards to like what kind of like leftist I am, but I would say leftism. And then also in regards to voting, it's going to be the same. I'm not positing any like structure. I'm describing reality as how it is. So when we look at just like people and how they vote, if they're exposed to more ideas that say, hey, we don't like this minority group of people, they're going to vote negatively. We still give people the right to vote, but what we should be doing in society, I would say, is kind of looking at the stimuli that are around people and what are causing them to think certain things, and having some basis of like, we want equality, we want justice, we want equality of opportunity. We should kind of promote such things and promote such education that explains how we can get there, and people would vote accordingly. So it's just kind of about, again, like, I mean, all of like what I would want for voting is going to entail what system I would like us to live in, what values I have. Again, it's going to be equality of opportunity, well-being of humans. So I don't see the problem.
And he was also asking, why do you wear a cross? I guess he's asking if you're a Christian or...
Yeah, I think it just looks cute. And then I'm agnostic, so.
Okay. We have Chef Dill Pickles. Thank you, man.
Chef Dill Pickles donated $69. Zina, thank you for admitting that you are racist against white people. What a disgusting bigot.
Didn't I say I loved Kelly Clarkson? I don't know what that means, but.
Well, even insinuating that's white culture is kind of disingenuous.
It's racist?
Well, I'm not saying it's racist, but it's certainly disingenuous when you look at the history of, European cultures, Byzantium, Western civilization, all these different things.
When did I say that was all that? I didn't never say
I
it was
didn't
all.
say. I
So
mean,
how
I'm
is it
just saying
disingenuous?
because to choose that when somebody's asking about white culture is just. It just seems
How is it
disingenuous. It's kind of mocking it.
I didn't know it was mocking. I actually like Kelly Clarkson.
Okay.
And
Maybe.
sometimes
Okay.
Taylor Swift
That's
gets
just the way
down.
that I took it.
Yeah,
okay, go ahead.
It's kind of sensitive, isn't it?
Oh, that's sensitive. It is disingenuous to equate white culture with Kelly Clarkson.
I never said that.
It's kind of low IQ and low tier.
How is Kelly Clarkson low IQ?
That's white culture. Kelly Clarkson is white culture.
Is it not?
She's a white person that plays music, but
Yeah.
culture
There are a
no,
lot
she
of
is
white
not.
people
She is not a
tend to-
cultural phenomenon in
That white-
regards to culture and like capital C culture, like Western civilization culture,
What makes
Christian
culture?
Western culture,
What makes
American
culture? What makes culture culture? What's are you the arbiter of what culture
Well,
is?
usually, again, religion, politics, again, all these different presuppositional frameworks are going to define what culture is.
Not-
And somebody studying sociology should be
Culture
familiar.
has to do with music
Should
too.
be. Yes, it does.
I'll inform you then.
Yes,
So,
it
yeah,
does.
Music,
And it has to do with a sacred
film,
canopy.
the kind of things that you like, practices,
Absolutely.
etc.
Yep.
So Kelly Clarkson being like a white artist in America, American culture is something that's kind of tricky to define because it's really influenced by a lot of minority communities. But especially in America, someone who a lot of white people in America would really enjoy. I would say that yeah, she is like related to like white culture and the things that the people in this country, white people in this country enjoy. But so do other people. But yeah.
All right, we have Retro. Thank you, man.
Retro donated $69. Zina, you know that DPH showed up to the debate today. So did he have a choice?
No, and you didn't have the choice to make that comment either. Wow, determinism.
Okay.
Pretty hard logic there, guys. Hard to defeat that.
I'm just going to read these instead of doing them as TTSs. Thank you, Retro, for the message.
Chef Dill Pickles
I guess
donated
it's- okay, never mind.
$69. Zima, can you please delineate good from bad actions? Why aren't they simply actions?
Yeah.
What are morals?
Yeah. So again, the position I'm taking is that moral claims are not truth apt, and thus there's not any absolutely like fundamentally like unless you can again give some, like, you couldn't give some evidence for it, because moral claims would just be, that our objective would just be true, evidently. Like, they would just be true. And clearly, I don't think that we've, like, found that to be the case. So instead, I would say that, like, there are things that we call good and bad, but they're based on, like, a conception of it, or like a feeling towards it. So something being good and bad is one, when someone's talking about something, it's going to be different compared to when someone's talking about another thing. Or the types of people that are talking about morality are going to be having different takes on what's good and bad. Someone like Patrick would probably have, like, many different ideas of what is good, and he would totally believe that it's totally good, and I would have different beliefs on what is totally good and totally bad. Obviously, he says that there is some objective morality, yet we don't agree that that is evidently true. There's a problem there. So again, yeah, good is going to be something that is, like, contextual.
All right, we have Justin Henley. Justin, thank you very much for your message. Zina, you're internally critiquing Christianity. God is omnipotent, but you claim he cannot create free will. Your critique fails logic. Counter, if no objective truth exists, is logic... ...
Okay. So first of all, the internal critique was saying that free will cannot exist, and that it's incoherent that God says that free will exists, and also says that he knows all things and how they will exist and how they will be, and there is some set future that is going to exist. So that was, the critique was that saying that free will can exist in that type of framework is a contradiction. There's a contradiction in those beliefs. And then I can't remember the last thing that was said.
He was saying, he said, God is omnipotent, but you claim he cannot create free will. Your critique fails logic. Counter, if no objective truth exists, is logic. And that was, perhaps he ran out of characters.
I guess I'll just say, it's probably like alluding to like how logic works. Yeah, again, once again, all scientists, a lot of them are not Christian, a lot of them don't believe in objective morality. And so do, I think, the rest of us as well, agree that there is some reality, right? And once we agree that there is some reality that exists outside of ourselves, we then can pattern it, we can then, test it, we can look for causes, etc. And kind of that's what happens. And then we can create structures and frameworks, and we can dissect things through logic. Like, logic is a system of governing and making claims and et cetera to move people's credences, et cetera. And we can do that once we accept, basic claims like we all exist, reality exists, et cetera. So yeah, again, no problem there. This has been a fact of philosophy and science for years.
All right, we have Chef Dill Pickles. Thank you, man. Would you believe me if I said I wasn't racist simply because I like Lil Wayne's music?
I don't even know what to say about that one. Lil Wayne is good, though.
Okay. A couple quick messages here at the end. Guys, if you enjoyed the stream, hit the like video, please. Also, if you guys are watching over there on Twitch or you're just watching on YouTube, if you can, open up another tab, go to twitch.tv/whatever, drop us a follow and a Prime sub if you have one. If you have Amazon Prime, you can link it to your Twitch. It's a quick, free, easy way to support the show. Also, we have a really fantastic community, discord.gg/whatever. We post our stream schedule so you can get advance notice of when we're kind of doing a debate or something else. You can also buy some merch, shop.whatever.com. And yeah, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. Like the video, please. Let me just double check, make sure, see if we have any other chats coming in. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else we needed to go over. One sec, guys. Patrick is going to be joining us tomorrow for our dating talk panel.
Looking forward
That's going to be
that.
live at 5 p.m. Pacific. We have a really fantastic panel lined up for you guys. So be sure to tune in 5 p.m. Pacific tomorrow, Sunday, dating talk panel. Got some interesting guests for that. And let me see if there's anything else. I do want to thank both of you very much for joining me today for the debate. It was great to have both of you. Very interesting debate. And yeah, thank you guys so much. And let me just double check. Don't want to screw anybody over. If anybody sent in a last minute message, let's see here. No, we are all good. Okay, cool. Let me just check. All right, guys. Well, in the chat, 07's in the chat, please. Oh, did you have?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay, I thought you were gesturing like one more thing. Okay. In the chat, guys, 07's in the chat. Like the video on your way out, please. 07's in the chat. And guys, tune in tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific, Dating Talk, fantastic panel. Patrick's going to be there. It's going to be fantastic. So we'll see you guys tomorrow.